Good morning and welcome to the second day of the House of Representatives budget hearings for this year's budget. We are glad this morning to be joined by Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and to see familiar faces. Welcome back, Secretary Carroll, to a chamber where you've spent a few decades. I mean, I didn't want to say it like that, but you was here for a while, Mike, so. All right. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As we continue these budget hearings, we're looking at a lot of increased spending. The governor's proposed $3.5 billion in increased spending, and we understand there are obligations that we have to meet. But we also have to look at ways that we can save money, be more efficient in delivering those services. And I know, PennDOT is near and dear to my heart, 14 years working for the department. But I also understand that the road ahead is bumpy. And we need to fix that. We have a lot of issues dealing with transit, infrastructure, and we have some hard questions today, and we will be fair, though, and look for numbers that help us get to where we need to be related to the budget without hopefully having to increase any taxes or fees. So, thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Secretary, please introduce the folks who are here with you, and after that introduction, we'll swear everybody in, and then we'll get started.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Harris, Chair Struzzi, members of the Appropriations Committee, and other members on the floor. It's a pleasure to be back in the chamber again. After having spent, as the chair said, a long time in this chamber, I value the work that each of you do. It is important work, and the complexities of governing in this state are not lost on me. 67 counties with wide disparities in how people look at things, and somehow we have to reconcile and distill all of that down to bills that can make it to the governor's desk that meet the needs of 13 million people. Quite a complicated assignment. So thank you for your good work. I'm the Secretary of Transportation, and I can tell you it's the highest of honors to serve in this role. Governor Shapiro gave me the honor of leading this wonderful agency, and when I was in the House, I was a defender of all things PennDOT because I thought they did a really good job. I was wrong. PennDOT's better than I thought. They do an even better job than I knew when I served as a member of the House of Representatives. I will not tell you that PennDOT is perfect. We are not. We do our level best, and every now and then something happens and it makes you scratch your head. But on balance, this is a really capable agency with an assignment that is daunting. Meet the needs, the transportation needs of 13 million people, and do that every single day. There's the job. It's hard. But with a wonderful team, we're up to that challenge, and I'll introduce the team that's with me today. Deputy Secretary Chris Norris for Highway Administration, Executive Deputy Larry Shiflett, the Deputy for Multimodal, Meredith Bajika, our Chief Fiscal Officer, the gentleman that does real math, Chuck Zimmerman, and the Deputy for Driver and Vehicle Services, Kara Templeton, and an array of folks behind me that represent the very best of PennDOT. So, Chair Harris, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to the dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, if you and all of your deputies may stand so we can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? Thank you so much. You may be seated. Outside of those comments, did you have any other further comments? You want to go straight to questions?
Let's just go right to the question.
Thank you, sir. We will start with Representative Young.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Black History Month. Gotta say that it's February. Questions. In terms of diversity, can you discuss the makeup of the current PennDOT leadership team and the recruitment efforts that the agency is involved in?
So thank you for the question, and it's an important question. PennDOT is not the leader of agencies when it comes to diversity, but we're making positive steps in the right direction. Okay. It was a white male-dominated entity for a long time. That change, that important change was underway when I became the secretary, and we are accelerating that as quickly as possible to make sure that we have the very best and brightest folks that work for our department that represent the diversity of this great state. And so when it comes to women and minorities, we are doing everything possible to make sure that we populate our ranks with the very best and brightest, and not all of those people are middle-aged white guys from Scranton.
Thank you for saying that with such transparency. However, given the optics of the room today, right, can you explain to us the process of measurement on what your leadership diversity scale looks like as opposed to your entry-level diversity scale looks like?
So when it comes to the entry-level folks that work in our county maintenance offices, of course, we have a better success record with diversity from the counties that you could predict in southeastern Pennsylvania, and in Allegheny County and in Monroe County. It is a challenge for us, admittedly, to have a diverse workforce in places like Potter County or Tioga County. There just simply aren't the diversity numbers in the population that lives there. But despite that, we do our level best to make sure that we are, again, hiring the best and brightest, but also reflecting the diversity of the state.
Okay, how about your process of identifying contractors, specifically the African American and the Latino businesses? What are the current minority participation goals for those particular contractors?
So we have federal requirements that we have to meet when it comes to the small businesses and small minority businesses, and we, of course, comply with the federal requirements when it comes to reporting those numbers. PennDOT is aggressively working to advance the pool of qualified firms that can do work for us, whether it's consulting firms or other vendors. We have an outreach program that's aggressive, including a mentor-protege program, to make sure that we are being helpful for firms that are small, women-owned, veteran-owned, black and brown-owned, that they understand the steps necessary to become qualified to do work with PennDOT. We're being as aggressive as we can be. And again, the goal is to make sure that we have the very best vendors helping deliver the transportation network that we need.
Okay, thank you for that. The last thing I would add is that it appears as if we can be a little bit more helpful from at least my perspective in helping you identify such talents, because we do represent a great wealth of diverse talents in our districts. I'm representing Philadelphia and Delaware County, but I know there's so many people who will be gladly a part of such teams if they're understanding more about what that process looks like. So I look forward to working with you.
And I thank you, and I know that you're involved in this effort in your region in Southeast PA, and I thank you for that. You know, having members of the General Assembly like you helping match PennDOT with small businesses that are looking to do work with us, I'm appreciative of your work in that field and others that might be doing the same thing. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and thank you, Secretary Carroll, for being here this morning, and your staff, and thank you for the issues you have, we resolved back in the district office. Really appreciate that. We're going to hear all kind of arguments today on SEPTA and really why they need more money from mass transportation, why they need more of those dollars. But I want to focus on last year when the governor flexed. He took $153 million from a federal highway fund. Coming from rural Pennsylvania, we got to fight for these dollars. Can you explain?
Can the gentleman move the mic up? Move the mic up.
Is that better? We good?
A little bit better. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about the $153 million and what, I believe there were 7 projects that were canceled, correct?
Not canceled, Rep. The 7 projects that we are going to deliver virtually in the same time frame as they would have been delivered. We simply took advantage of a cash flow opportunity to solve the immediate problem of SEPTA and deliver all of those 7 projects in their due course. The one that may be delayed just the slightest bit, I-83 in York County, but we're doing everything possible to deliver that modest project on its original schedule as well. So when it comes to the flow of federal funds from FHWA to PennDOT, there are cash flow opportunities that dollars are available that could be spent last year that will allow us to deliver the projects in those 7 highway projects in their normal course.
Okay, cool. And was this something that the Biden administration had to give you guys permission on, or is this approval of any way, or you guys had the flexibility to do it at all?
No, it required Federal Highway Administration approval, and so that, of course, happened during the Biden administration. He was the president at the time. I will remind you that we flex money all the time. Every year there is a flex of $25 million that happens in due course. It is not uncommon for states, across the nation to flex funds to meet transit needs. So that is not out of the ordinary. And again, we'll deliver those 7 projects virtually at the same moment that they would have been delivered.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank the gentleman for his questions. Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, thank you and your team for, and we talked before, all the hard work getting ready for today and then the budget to come as we figure it all out. I kind of have a 2-part question, and it's a little bit on the sensitive side, but so I want to be matter of fact about it. It's the way I present it anyway. The federal budget, as it's aligned today, expires March 14th. So a month from now. There's also been funding freezes and other things. Are there programs in PennDOT that are currently affected by that scenario?
So the continuing resolution that's running the country, as you said, expires March 14th, and I'm going to live in the world where there's an extension of that continuing resolution or an enacted federal budget. If the worst-case scenario were to occur and there would be a government shutdown on March 14th, the effect on PennDOT would not be felt that day. It would be weeks or months before our cash flow challenges would percolate to the point where we'd have tremendous challenges. So with respect to the federal budget, that's sort of the lay of the land. When it comes to PennDOT funds for highways, transit, rail, aviation, Port of Philadelphia, there are awarded funds that are obligated that I have no concern over. I consider that a contractual obligation between the federal government and the Commonwealth for the delivery of those funds. And then there are federal funds that were awarded discretionary grants. For example, $143 million for the Second Pennsylvania train service from Harrisburg to Altoona to Pittsburgh. There was an award, but no obligation, so essentially no contract that exists between the Commonwealth and those funds. Same with I-83, $500 million that carries I-83 over the Susquehanna River. So when it comes to the lay of the land, when it comes to federal funds, funds that were discretionary awards that haven't been obligated are sort of in question right now. Doesn't mean they're lost. They've been paused, and we would be hesitant to go forward with the use of those funds absent an obligation.
My understanding is some of them are on a percentage basis, so that you expect that would impact all 50 states if funds were frozen.
Well, when it comes to the discretionary grants, Representative, my suspicion is the FHWA and the Trump administration could pick and choose which ones they advance and which ones they don't. At the end of the day, it was a discretionary grant. And I'm going to believe that a discretionary grant that was provided during the last administration would be honored by the new administration. It would be very difficult, it seems to me, to tell the people of Pennsylvania that despite an award of $500 million for I-83, we're going to take that away. I guess it's possible, but I'm going to live in the world where the commitments that were made, short of an obligation, will stand.
Right. Well, and I'll just summarize that. I think it's generous and professional to say we're committed partners with our federal government, and we expect it to play out that way.
In a big way. I mean, 13 million Pennsylvanians are shared constituents for Governor Shapiro and President Trump. And so when it comes to the delivery of a transportation network, no matter what mode we're talking about, these grants were all important grants. There's nothing frivolous with respect to the discretionary grants that were awarded. I can tell you that when PennDOT made an application for a discretionary grant, in fact, our number one priority was the $500 million for I-83. I took the time to visit every member of Congress, every one, in D.C., and they were all supportive. Every single member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Pennsylvania, both parties, supported our grant by co-signing a letter. So I know that people that are Democrats, Republicans, independents, and unregistered folks use our assets every day. And so I live in a world where there are no red or blue bridges. There are bridges.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We thank the gentleman. Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I got to say, and I know that you appreciate this as a former state representative, but I just want to say to the rest of your staff that is here, your job, your agency, at least from my perspective, has to be the most important one that we hear about the most from our constituents across the board. Every single time I have a town hall, when I have meetings, I just had a meeting the other day about a road in Industry Borough that is in need of services. I've been in this job for 6 years, and PennDOT issues and the work that you do has been at the top of the list of town halls, of meetings, consistently across the board. It may not get the same headlines as everything else, but your job is extremely important to me and my constituents, and I think that probably goes for all the representatives here. So thank you for what you do. On that note, funding for transportation and for these issues is very critical, and making sure that funding is done equitably is something that is very important to me, coming from a more rural area of the state. I represent Beaver and Washington counties, and I had some questions regarding the transit agencies and mass transit funding. There was a proposed $300 million or so bailout for mass transit agency operating budgets. Could you tell me how much of that money is going towards SEPTA, the Southeastern Transit Authority, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it a bailout. I would call it state support for important work that is done in the world of transportation. And the amount of money that flows to every transit agency, including SEPTA, is statutorily driven by a formula that is enacted in this chamber. So PennDOT does not get to pick and choose how much SEPTA gets. It is statutory.
How much would it be?
In the neighborhood of 50%.
50% of the $300 million?
168 million.
168 million would be the correct. As far as the overall budget, how much money is being funneled to SEPTA with the governor's proposal?
Well, the governor is proposing an additional carve-out of 1.75% on the sales tax that generates that $290 million, and of that, the amount that I just mentioned goes to SEPTA directly as a result of the additional funds.
And that's the overall? Everything, not just this?
I'll let Meredith give you the lay of the land prior to the additional $290 million.
The estimated state grant award for fiscal year 25-26 under the budget is approximately $1 billion.
$1 billion, okay. And back in 2023, there was some remarks made by SEPTA regarding COVID relief funds that they were going to use to plug the budget. And I'm curious, how much money in COVID relief did SEPTA receive over the course of the last number of years?
So those dollars funnel directly to SEPTA. PennDOT is the pass-through for the rural agency, so I don't have that number available, but we can certainly see if we can get it for you.
Okay, if you could get that for me, that would be great. I just have a concern, because it seems to me, and I've only been here for 6 years, but it seems to me that every year there's a fire alarm happening with SEPTA, and there needs to be increased funding. And I come from a business background. I've represented a lot of businesses. And one of the main things that we would do and we would propose is having a strategic plan. Is there a strategic plan for SEPTA as far as funding, or is this going to be just every year another fire alarm that we're trying to fix? What's the long-term prognosis for this? What's the fix for this?
So the fix that the governor proposes is for transit agencies across the state, including PRT in southwestern Pennsylvania. So it is not simply a SEPTA challenge financially. It's a challenge for transit agencies in urban centers across the country, including Pittsburgh. I would offer that SEPTA did raise their fares at the end of last year in an effort to try and get a little bit more revenue from riders. But the reality is that the economy of this state is driven in a large way by those 5 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. And I take the Philadelphia Chamber at their word. When the Chamber of Commerce says that this is important for our region, I take the Chamber at their word. So I will let SEPTA answer the questions that you're asking directly related to SEPTA. I don't have a seat on the SEPTA board, neither does anybody at this table. We do our best to make sure that we're partners with SEPTA to deliver a transportation option that people rely on in Southeast PA, just as we do with the PRT in Allegheny County, as we do with Indigo in Indiana County.
Yeah, and I appreciate that answer. And there's no doubt that that region of the Commonwealth is an important region, but my constituents are having a hard time figuring out why all of this money keeps going there and why it keeps every year we're asking for more and more. But thank you for your answers. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Just for clarity, I mean, there hasn't been an additional funding for transit in 10 years in this Commonwealth. So this is not, the annual effort to try and secure additional funds does occur, but there hasn't been additional funds for 10 years.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, always good to see you, and the deputy secretaries and directors. Thank you for everything you do, and I want to start with a shout out to District 6 and the fine people that work there, always incredibly responsive, and had the opportunity to tour their headquarters a couple times in the past few years, and very impressive on the technological cutting edge for sure. So kudos for all those improvements and efforts there. Wanted to drill in a little bit on Rep. Webster's question and into a specific program, and it may be one of the discretionary programs you could tell me that you were discussing. The NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Could you describe that a little bit, and also how the apparent funding freeze might affect that, and what PennDOT's plans are if it does?
So this will be a lengthy answer, but it's an important topic, so thank you for raising it. The NEVI program was language that was included in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was, of course, the federal transportation bill enacted 3 years ago. Pennsylvania, by program, over the course of the 5 years, would receive $170 million to implement the provisions of NEVI, which is essentially charging stations for electric vehicles across the Commonwealth. The law prescribed that the states, all 50 states, were required to build out their alternative fuel corridors, which essentially are the interstate highways and interstate lookalikes in Pennsylvania. And PennDOT was down the path quite a distance among the 50 states. We have few peers when it comes to the delivery of NEVI. Ohio, Kentucky, Rhode Island come to mind, but really PennDOT was a leader in the nation when it came to delivery. To give you the numbers, of the $170 million, PennDOT has 70 of the 170 obligated. So that is money that has been spent for charging stations that are open. We will open the 8th charging station this week, and the first one to open in Pennsylvania was on I-81 near Pittston in Luzerne County, and PennDOT has these 8 open, and then we have another 75 or so that are going to go under construction as part of the obligated funds. So it is my firm belief that we will deliver a network that builds out our alternative fuel corridor in maybe not perfectly, but very close. There may be a rant. The federal law requires gaps no greater than 50 miles. My suspicion is that we'll meet that standard with maybe one exception on I-80 in rural Pennsylvania somewhere. But so $70 million obligated, I consider that a contractual obligation. The remaining $100 million is in question. What the Trump administration and what the U.S. DOT and others in D.C. decide to do with that remains to be seen. I know this. When I see NASCAR is going to go electric vehicles at the Daytona 500 in 2035, it confirms what I believe, that there will be more electric vehicles tomorrow than there are today, and more the day after that. So I understand that there's some heartburn that folks have with electric vehicles. There's no mandate. If somebody wants to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle, they can. But the reality is that we have people all across this state that have EVs, and having a charging network that was envisioned by virtue of a federal bill that was enacted. PennDOT did a really good job advancing the NEVI build-out. We will continue to spend the obligated funds and work with our federal partners to deliver the rest.
Thank you for that very comprehensive answer. And just one quick follow-up. Have you gotten any of I think you said you're opening the 8th charging station. Have you gotten any preliminary feedback on the ones that have opened, like regarding usage or things like that?
That is all tracked very carefully, and I can tell you that they are widely used. The first one to open, as I said, on 81 in Pittston, is unbelievably busy, as are the others that have opened. Venango County was the second or third. Carlisle just this week. Delaware County, one opened. They are all widely used. And, the reality is that we have tens of thousands of electric vehicles registered in our state. We have tens of thousands of hybrid electric vehicles registered in this state. There'll be more tomorrow than there are today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary. Go Birds.
I'm proud of the work that PennDOT did in support of the Philadelphia Police Department with the parade. It was a wild success.
I appreciate that. I just say that because now I want carte blanche to say whatever I want because I say Go Birds.
I'm sure there are limits.
I have nothing. I'm not going to say anything about the Southeast. Negative. Yeah, some of us care about the environment, all right, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Secretary, so I just wanted to follow up on what Devanzo and Kale were asking about the increase in the sales and use tax to 1.75. So is it my understanding, just doing public school math, 1.75 plus the 7% or whatever we're at now, we're almost around 10% of sales and use tax going to mass transit? Is that the case?
I'll take your math as a good rounding.
Okay. So I'm just trying to figure this out. So if we're doing 10% of sales and use tax, all sales and use in all Commonwealth is going to transit, mass transit, and then we're sending, would you say a little earlier, $1 billion to Southeast? How are we making sure that those other 63 counties are getting, and I know you mentioned the funding formula and all that, but doesn't that seem a little goofy that the whole Commonwealth is paying into this and 60-some% is going to the Southeast?
Rep, I would offer that you have the capacity in this chamber to change the statutory formula to direct funds in a different way. PennDOT will comply with the law, and we will deliver the funds as are legislatively, statutorily prescribed.
And the reason why I asked is because I just recently read about some communities growing or growing counties. Are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry?
Counties growing legislation, are you familiar with that?
I am not familiar with county growing. I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
I just found out about it, and I was just trying to read up on it. I was hoping you knew a little bit more to speak on it, but it's about giving more funding, and maybe we can talk about this later, about giving more funding to the growing counties, like Lehigh and Northampton counties.
Yeah, I'm at a loss here. The only thing that Meredith mentioned, the federal discussion about directing additional federal funds to regions that have high birth rates.
Maybe that's what it is, and increasing in our area. The only reason why I asked...
I'm not sure our area would be a winner in that regard.
Well, and the only reason why I asked is because I know Atlanta, in our area, Lehigh and Northampton, is struggling with getting ridership. Well, their ridership is up, but getting transit to pick these people up. We have people that are sick. Someone was just telling me the other day that they're an amputee and they can't get a ride to the hospital for a hospital appointment. Now, I don't know the background on that, but I just want to make sure that the people can get to where they need to, and we make sure that we have the adequate funding to get the most vulnerable people to where they need to go.
Well, thank you for that. And you're highlighting what I have said more than once, and that we have transit in every county in this state, including Lehigh and Northampton, and the other counties near the Lehigh Valley. So I know there's tremendous focus on what happens when it comes to SEPTA and the transit options in Southeast PA, but you're highlighting what I have declared more than once, and that is we have transit in every county in this state, and the transit for an amputee in the Lehigh Valley is just as important as transit for somebody to go from King of Prussia to Philadelphia.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that was it, just to highlight that we got to try to get this money out to the other counties, not just focus on the Southeast, and do what we can to make sure everyone is getting those funds and the transportation they need, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. And I think what you're going to hear during the course of the next few months as the budget ripens is a chorus of voices from transit agencies across the state, including Atlanta, that highlight the need for these additional funds. It is not just a Philadelphia Southeast PA story. This is a story that is important for all 67 counties.
I agree with that, Mr. Secretary, and I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Mullins.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary, to you and your team, it's good to have you back in the chamber, of course, and to the bench of folks behind you. I always try to sign off with my thanks in the emails and calls, and trying to express our appreciation for just what you do to help us serve people back home. But I want to say it en masse, just how much I value and appreciate your work. It's good to have another Northeast PA face behind you in Jonathan Ebley, too. That man deserves a shout out, and I'm grateful to him. For the sake of routine and predictability, I, of course, would like an update, if possible, on the restoration of passenger rail from northeastern Pennsylvania to New York City. The uncertainty relative to federal funding, of course, has put many projects into uncertainty and doubt, and I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on that issue.
So thank you again for this question, and it is predictable, but it's also important. And I know the people of northeastern Pennsylvania and Lackawanna County and Monroe County and others have been fighting this fight for a long time. I'll start by thanking Bob Hay and Larry Malski for their wonderful leadership in the Monroe and Lackawanna counties, and a whole slew of other folks that have been advocates for the restoration of passenger rail from Scranton to the Poconos for a long time. I will brag on PennDOT and our consultant partners for getting PennDOT as far as Scranton, as far as we have with Federal Railroad Administration. And the Scranton project is one of 5 in the nation that reached the stage where a service development plan is being put together. That is an important milestone when it comes to the work that is being done to advance the restoration of this passenger rail service. We are eager to see the Reading to Philadelphia proposal reach that same stage, and that gets us to the uncertainties that are in Washington, D.C. When it comes to passenger rail service generally. Because the Scranton project received approval to go to the corridor, or to the service delivery plan, we continue in that regard, absent any declaration from the Federal Railroad Administration to stop. We await the approval for the Reading to Philadelphia service delivery plan approval. We do not have that yet, and it would be a fool's errand for me to try and predict future steps from the FRA or any of our other federal partners when it comes to how they intend to orchestrate the delivery of these projects.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to remain positive, Representative, that at the end of the day, the merits of the proposal stand, and that our federal partners will share the vision that the folks of Lackawanna County and Monroe County have for the delivery of this service. It's not lost on me, as somebody who used to represent Monroe County and Lackawanna County, that we have busloads of folks, especially in the Poconos, that go back and forth every day to northern New Jersey and New York City. I have no doubt that if we had restoration of passenger rail, we will have folks on that train every day.
That's great to hear. So is it safe to say that this is, it is fortunately this project has sufficient merit and it is far enough along in its in the process following the Corridor ID program and ultimate selection by the FRA that we are, again, we never say never, and of course can't predict the future, but we are in we are in a somewhat secure space relative to threats from the federal government.
We are in step 2, and that is an important achievement. Like I said, only 5 projects in the nation have received that step. And it's worth noting some of them are from red states, if we want to characterize, these sorts of projects. I mean, one comes to mind in Texas that's important to the people in Texas. And so when it comes to how the federal administration will deal with these unfolding projects, it remains to be seen. But the reality is that these, as highway and bridge projects, as port projects, as aviation projects. They're all important. And so the members of Congress that served at the time BIL was enacted from both parties advanced that legislation to the president's desk, and it was enacted. And the people of Scranton and Monroe County wisely took advantage of that opportunity when there was $66 billion on the table at FRA for the delivery of these types of projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Alsomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Am I saying your name right, brother? Because
Ulsummer. You're saying it fine.
Say it again.
Yep. Excuse me?
Say it again.
Ulsummer.
Okay, I just want to get it right. I don't want to say people's names.
You're doing
wrong.
fine.
All right, appreciate you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Appreciate all your testimony, and everybody else up there sincerely appreciate all you do for the state. I'd like to echo a little bit and make a comment and ask a quick question about a follow-up on what my colleagues had been talking about. You know, one of the concerns my constituents will have, and I'm in southern Wayne County and Pike County, is, you know, we don't ride mass transit, and why are our tax dollars going to SEPTA and Pittsburgh for things we don't participate in? My question is this. You mentioned something about the cost of a fare. What do they charge currently for a SEPTA pass or a ticket?
Yeah, I'm going to let SEPTA deal with that, Rep. I mean, there's more than one variety of. They have a subway, they have buses, they have regional rail. There are opportunities for senior citizens. So there's a scale that would be too much for me to memorize. To be truthful with you, we'll get that for you. But I will remind you that that there is transit in Pike County. In fact, the Pike County Commissioners invited me to visit the facility that is under construction in Milford, and there is transit in Wayne County. It's called Shared Ride. And the people in Wayne County that take advantage of that seldom have other choices.
Yes, yeah, I appreciate if you could get me that information on the rates charged for mass transit. That'd be awesome with SEPTA. Thank you, sir. Continuing along, during the governor's budget address on February 4th, he stated that he directed the budget secretary to conduct, in his words, a comprehensive review of every program we offer in our Commonwealth to identify inefficiencies and costs that can be eliminated. The initiative, known as REMAP, is incorporated into the budget proposal by sunsetting programs that are duplicative and don't work. Were you involved in that process, Mr. Secretary?
No, the three agencies that were identified to be at the front end of that conversation did not include PennDOT.
Okay. What inefficiencies and costs were identified within your department, and what cost savings will the Commonwealth realize as a result of this comprehensive review?
I'm not sure what will come of the other agencies. You'll have the opportunity to interrogate the secretaries from those other agencies. What I would say is this, Representative, that we strive every day to make sure that we are careful and proper stewards of taxpayer dollars. I sat in the chair that you sit in. It's not lost on me that when we ask taxpayers to pay for a gallon of gasoline or to renew their driver's license, that those funds are precious. And we, in coordination with our partners, private industry that deliver many of our construction projects and consultants that work in cities around this state, we understand the importance of those tax dollars, and we guard them as precious assets. The governor's charge to me, and I'm sure to every secretary, is to make sure that we utilize the taxpayers' dollars in the most judicious way we can. It is at the core of what PennDOT does. Of course, the challenge for us is to deliver a transportation network with the use of those tax dollars, both federal and state, and to deliver those projects in the very best way we can so that taxpayers know that their dollars are being used wisely.
I guess, not to beat a dead horse, but given the fiscal issues that are looming in the Commonwealth and not identified in the REMAP initiative. Can we work, what other areas can we work collectively on to help address these issues?
I guess, Representative, I mean, you're doing that today. You know, the members of the General Assembly have oversight ability with respect to all of these agencies, and here I sit to answer questions on behalf of PennDOT. I can tell you again that we strive to make sure that we use every dollar and stretch it as far as we can. The challenge is difficult for us. The needs are vast. To give you a sense, Representative, PennDOT has more miles of roadway than New York, New Jersey, and the New England states combined. And by the way, tonight, if it snows in Pike County, there's a half-mile dead-end road, Pond Eddy Road. It's a state highway, sir. That does not exist in New York and New Jersey. But PennDOT will deal with that. I'm not complaining. But that's the lay of the land when it comes to PennDOT. We have a network of 25,000 state bridges, more than almost any other state. The task for us is a challenge, and we'll be up to it even on Pond Eddy Road.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Secretary. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Morning.
I have spoken to PennDOT about this before in my role as chair of the Budget Equity Subcommittee of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, and I know PennDOT had dedicated staff working on diversifying your contracting pool and the companies that you work with in terms of the billions of dollars that are allocated for road construction every year. So can you give me some progress on how that effort is going, and have you achieved some success in terms of diversifying the number of, Black women-owned businesses that you work with in terms of those that contract with PennDOT?
Well, thank you so much. And, Governor Shapiro and Lieutenant Governor Davis gave this charge to all agencies, including PennDOT, considering the sums of money that we have at our disposal. Lieutenant Governor Davis, along with Secretary McNeil and me and others, working with partners that understand the challenges that exist for minority and women-owned and veteran-owned businesses to make sure that we up our game when it comes to making sure that those opportunities exist for vendors that may not be in the universe of folks that do work with the Commonwealth now. Yeah. We have made real progress in that regard. I will not declare victory today, but simply say that we will continue to strive to make sure that we have an array of businesses that represent the diversity of this state that are ready to provide the support that we need to deliver projects.
And any data you have, I ask that you provide to the chairman in that regard in terms of progress made over the last two plus years.
Happy to get the granular data to you. I don't have that committed to memory.
No worries. Yep.
Instead of paging through this big binder that they give me, we'll just get you that information, and then you can judge for yourself the success of our progress.
Not a problem. Along that same vein, I'm just wondering, when we talk about road construction, are there ways that PennDOT gets involved either to help, and I know Representative Young touched on this earlier, to help get more people of color, veterans, women, et cetera, into leadership positions in PennDOT, for example? Like, is there a pipeline or a desired pipeline that people can start out here and then eventually they can get to foreman and things like that? Are there those advancement opportunities within the agency?
Tremendous opportunities for advancement, and it applies to the entire workforce. I mean, PennDOT employs 11,000 folks across this state. I was in Erie Thanksgiving weekend to deal with the blizzard that occurred on I-90, and we had deployed PennDOT workforce and trucks and loaders and such to Erie County in support of the response to the storm. And I had the opportunity to ride in a plow truck with a 23 or 24-year-old operator from Greene County, southwest Pennsylvania, near the West Virginia border. And I said, why are you here? And he said, I just want to be a part of the solution. My friends think I'm crazy for working for PennDOT, but it's what I want to do. Good. I want to be a foreman someday, and I don't know where I'm going to go after that. But
beautiful. He,
like others, and when it comes to the opportunity to advance in PennDOT, because it's such a large agency, for those that have that kind of drive, regardless of the color of their skin, there is an opportunity for them, and we will make sure that they have the opportunities and invest in them with training and leadership academies that we have internally and externally to make sure that those folks that have that drive, that we encourage them and support them in that effort.
That sounds phenomenal. Thank you. And one last thing I'd like to touch on is a little closer to home. I do want to commend your staff in District 8. We are embarking on a project. We need to work with the federal government on this to address United States Route 22. It happens to run the length of the entire district that I represent, coming from the city of Harrisburg and going over the State Street Bridge. And of course, once you hit PennDOT and Susquehanna Township, there are some serious issues on Route 22, and we've engaged our municipal partners as well as the folks in PennDOT District 8, and they have been willing participants to work with us and see how we can develop solutions. We're also working with Lower Paxton Township on a safety initiative on Union Deposit Road, which is in large part coming through PennDOT. So I just want to thank District 8 and your staff for the incredible work they've done here in the district. They've always been very responsive to me, and I just want to say I appreciate that, Secretary.
Well, thank you, and that's the second district to get a shout out. I heard one from District 6 before, now District 8, and I will tell you that I'm proud of the work that's done in every district. There may be an exception, but the reality is that from my interaction with House and Senate members, almost all of them have a wonderful relationship with the district executives from their region, and that is across the state. So Kevin Keefe and his team in District 8 do a really good job, as does Dean down in District 6, and I won't name all the others, but I'm proud of the work that they do.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Carroll and panel. And let's not leave out District 5, please. Okay, so if we're going to be throwing out all the kudos, we have wonderful folks at District 5, and thank you for that. And Secretary, I only have one question.
And by the way, I'm sure they're watching, so good job on your part. It makes that call to the county manager at Schuylkill a lot easier.
It's heartfelt. I only have one question, and it's related to the motor license fund, so a little broader than just District 5, but I'll reserve my right to ask additional if I need be. So in his first budget address, Governor Shapiro proposed phasing out state police reliance on the motor license fund, the MLF, over 5 years, which stepped down of $100 million per year from $500 million to zero in fiscal year 27-28. However, the General Assembly was more aggressive in that phase out and leaving just $250 million in state police funding from the MLF in the current budget year. Now the governor wants to keep more funding in the MLF, only shifting $50 million in fiscal year 25-26, an additional $50 million each fiscal year thereafter until it's completely removed from the MLF by fiscal year 29-30. So here's where I'm struggling with. Slowing the phase out would result in $375 million less for roads and bridges over the next 4 years. So subsequently, the governor's proposing a budget that's increasing spending by 7.5%. It's bailing out Dept. I realize you're not calling it a bailout, but it's draining the budget surplus. It taps into our rainy day fund for $1.6 billion at the end of fiscal year 26. And you know, Representative Kale had mentioned earlier how much, and I think all the representatives have said how much we rely on you. And I guess, Secretary Carroll, my question is, why would Governor Shapiro not propose additional funding for roads and bridges by simply keeping the accelerated payments on schedule?
I would remind you that the year prior to Governor Shapiro, the amount that was reduced was zero. And so the governor's proposal originally of $100 million a year for 5 years, if $50 million were to be decoupled this year, we'd be exactly on track. So instead of $100 million, you correctly noted the General Assembly and the governor signed a budget that included $125 in each of the first 2 years. That's a net of an additional $50 million that was decoupled. $50 million decoupled this year with the surplus from the first 2 years puts us exactly on track. 3 years, $300 million. And it's not lost on me that relieving pressure on the general fund is, I'm sure, part of this exercise. I will let the budget secretary get into the nuances of all of this, but when it comes to transit funding and state police funding, those are general fund obligations, as will be school funding, just to name one big one. So my suspicion is, and my belief is, that the $50 million decoupled this year is a reflection of the challenges that exist with respect to the general fund.
And it certainly will be a challenge, but we appreciate all the work you do, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mattson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here with your team today. And I want to echo my colleague, Representative Fleming's comments around District 8 and Kevin and his great team. They've been fantastic to work with, and it's been a real pleasure. So shout out to them and all the great work they do for us. My question involves an issue with great impact, not only to my district, but the entire region. And that is Interstate I-83 widening and the bridge project. We know that there is a lot of talk of federal budget cuts. This project, I believe, received $500 million in federal funds. And I just would like to see if we could get an update on the status of those funds. And if we do see a cut to those funds, what can we do as a body to ensure that we do something so that the bridge does not toll?
So thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, PennDOT's request for discretionary BIL funds of $500 million to support the delivery of that bridge over the Susquehanna River, which is a $1.2 billion project. $1.2 billion, one bridge. So $500 million, I asked for and received the support from every member of Congress from Pennsylvania, and the Federal Highway Administration provided that $500 million grant. The single largest discretionary grant in the history of PennDOT. The commitment that I made to every member of Congress from across the state is that if PennDOT were to be successful with that award, that the $500 million that's offset would be directed to projects in every congressional district in this state. So a congressional district in Erie is the beneficiary of the $500 million because that $500 million discretionary grant freed up that $500 million that we were able to spread across the state. I will continue to believe that the administration in D.C. will honor that $500 million award. We do not have those funds obligated yet. That is not there's no blame to be assigned there. There's no expectation that a project that is not ready to be delivered yet would have obligated funds with respect to the $500 million. So I'm going to continue to believe that the $500 million will be honored. If it is not, and it is withdrawn or rescinded by the federal administration, we have to build a bridge over the Susquehanna River to carry I-83. That's a fact. And if we don't have the $500 million, $1.2 billion will come out of our fund over the span of years it takes to deliver that project. We will do that. It has to happen, and it will happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the team. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning.
We've heard so much about the governor's desire to make Pennsylvania more competitive for business and for government to move at the speed of business, but I feel our infrastructure is lagging behind, and I know we all share that desire to make improvements necessary to make Pennsylvania open for business and allow new development and economic growth to come to the Commonwealth. I'm concerned primarily in our rural and suburban areas that are in dire need of state support to make our communities ready for an influx of jobs and to support our existing jobs that rely on this infrastructure day in and day out, essentially making Pennsylvania ready so if a big project decides I want to come to Pennsylvania tomorrow, we don't have to say we need years to set up our infrastructure. And Pennsylvania desperately needs leadership, I believe, from the governor and the administration on developing a comprehensive plan for transportation infrastructure that's sustainable, predictable, and forward-thinking. And otherwise, we won't be able to compete with other states to attract new businesses. And I noticed the proposed increase in the budget has $347 million, or a 25% increase for mass transit, but the proposed increase for state highways and bridges is just 1.9%, plus $19.1 million, or 1.2%, for highway maintenance, so 25% versus 1.9, 1.2 respectively. And I'm curious, what is the administration's plan to lead on prioritizing infrastructure in the Commonwealth aside from mass transit?
Every mode of transportation is important. Mass transit hasn't received additional state funds for over 10 years. I sat in this chamber when the passage of Act 44 and Act 89 occurred, and those were substantial steps to deliver additional funds. What you're overlooking with your analysis is the federal transportation bill that was enacted during the Biden administration delivered $800 million a year for road and bridge projects alone across our state.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, excuse me. I have limited time. I'd like to just get to the follow-up. Are you suggesting that the state need not invest additionally in infrastructure simply because the federal government has helped out? Wouldn't you agree that it's important the state continue to invest in our roads and bridges as well?
Sure, and I'm proud of the PennDOT's successes with respect to the delivery of road and bridge projects. We've repaired more bridges than any state in the nation last year.
Well, and Mr. Secretary, to that point, what I'd like to follow up to that point is
all right, stop.
I get a chance to answer the question here.
Hold on. Representative, I will give you additional time, but you have to let the Secretary answer your question.
Thank you for the latitude, Chairman, please.
Sure. Mr. Secretary, please continue with your answer.
Thank you. Of course, additional money would be wonderful, but I live in a world where the challenges of delivering transportation funding, whether it's for roads and bridges or transit, are real. It is tough to pass a bill in this chamber to raise money when it comes to transit or roads and bridges. I can tell you that for a fact. Very difficult. The needs are real. The network that we have is enormous. And I know there are the partners that deliver projects for us would like to see additional funds. So would I. But the governor smartly in his proposal directed the additional money to transit along with roads and bridges. And of course, this chamber and the chamber across the hall has the opportunity to weigh in. And if there is an appetite for additional monies for roads and bridges, I welcome that conversation.
I appreciate the response, Secretary. And I think the point I'd like to make in counter to that is we've repaired plenty of structurally deficient bridges. I think probably from a long-term abrogation of our duty to keep bridges in repair, right, with more miles of roads and harsher weather conditions than some of our southern states. So I think there's a need for us, more so than other states, to continue investing in roads and bridges as well as anything else. I will note there is certainly a need for transit to be supported to ensure that we have the ability to alleviate congestion in those major urban areas that rely on mass transit. At the same time, I'm trying to look out for my constituents in the mid-state who won't see most of those dollars going to mass transit and are instead asking me, why aren't my roads and bridges getting fixed? But I certainly appreciate the work you've done in the mid-state, and your district team has been great to work with. So I do want to compliment that and express my desire for a continued dialogue, both through these hearings and throughout the entire budget process, to ensure we can together come up with a plan that prioritizes roads and bridges, as well as recognizing our need to support mass transit.
I completely agree. I look forward to any conversation with you or others that seeks to add additional funds to both transit and roads and bridges.
Appreciate the time, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Waxman.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
I want to start with maybe a rhetorical question, which is, my district heavily relies on public transportation. Why should my taxpayers fund construction in rural Pennsylvania of roads and bridges? It's a little bit of a jarring question when you hear it said like that. The answer obviously is that we live in a society, and what happens in rural Pennsylvania and communities outside of my community impact my district. And so I hope that we can focus on thinking about transportation priorities as being statewide and not just individual parochial interests. So I guess the first question I have is there enough funding without Philadelphia taxpayers, without Southeast taxpayers, to fund construction and repair of roads and bridges in other parts of the Commonwealth?
When it comes to the economic vitality of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the revenues generated in sales tax or income tax or corporate net income tax, the 5 counties of southeastern Pennsylvania play a very large role in the revenues that are received by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Sullivan County is a wonderful county in this Commonwealth. I've been there many times. Eaglesmere is a really nice town. There's 4,000 people in Sullivan County. The economy of Pennsylvania is not driven by what happens in Sullivan County. It's important what goes on there, but the economic activity in the 5-county footprint of SEPTA matters greatly to the economy of every county in this state.
Thank you. But the second question that I have is more about a broader question about public transit and the threats of the cuts in federal funding. I don't want to ask you to speculate because we don't want to get into unknowns, but what is the general liability for Pennsylvania, broadly speaking, in terms of mass transit all over the state and how proposed cuts at the federal level might impact that?
Cuts in any mode of transportation would be very difficult to adjust to. Whether it's transit, whether it's road and bridges, whether it's aviation, all of the modes are important. They all have an important role when it comes to the delivery of people getting to and from work, to and from doctors and living their normal lives. The infrastructure of this Commonwealth, including transit and roads and bridges, is utilized by 13 million people every single day. And so the challenge is daunting. I will continue to live in the world where our federal partners understand the needs of transit and roads and bridges and the other modes, and will come to the very smart conclusion that all of those investments are worthy investments that deliver assets that are utilized by 13 million people for years and years.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Krupa.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary and staff, for being here and testifying this morning. As a follow-up to what Representative Coots was saying, I think it's important to highlight that there is currently a disparity between the funding for mass transit, such as SEPTA, and, for example, our liquid fuels allocations. So whereas the mass transit may be directly linked to a funding formula that will increase as the economy grows, we're looking at liquid fuels actually being on the decrease as those dollars are tied to the tax on gasoline and diesel. So I come from the 51st Legislative District, which is southern Fayette County, and it's a rural, underprivileged area, and my municipalities rely heavily on those liquid fuel numbers. So if you take a look at the estimates, $468 million is projected to go out next month, which is based on the 2024-25 funding. If I look at the calculated estimates for next year, those projected funds drop to $458.4 million, or a decrease by 2.1%. Is that something that PennDOT is looking at? With all the increases in inflation, it will be detrimental to my townships to see this kind of decrease in liquid fuel funding. So is that an issue that PennDOT is examining, and how are we going to rectify that situation?
Thank you for the question, and it's an important conversation. I know every community in this Commonwealth, including Fayette County communities, rely on a liquid fuel allocation. For context, that $470 million is about 8 cents a gallon. And you often hear Pennsylvania has one of the highest gas taxes in the nation. When we siphon off 8 cents a gallon to every community, and we siphon off 5 cents a gallon to the state police, we are in the middle of the pack among states when it comes to the gasoline tax. The General Assembly smartly last year enacted an electric vehicle fee bill that attempts to take steps to rectify the declining motor fuel tax revenue as a result of a migration of vehicle owners to electric and plug-in and hybrid, as well as internal combustion motors that are more fuel efficient. Your math is right. The money that PennDOT receives for liquid fuel allocation is declining because of EVs and hybrids and the fuel-efficient vehicles. So the additional money that comes in year one and then subsequent years from EV owners is a step that this General Assembly took, and I'm happy for it, to help offset some of the lost revenue when it comes to motor fuel taxes.
Is there any other current discussions or possible funding formulas to bridge that gap?
You're welcome to run a bill, I suppose, ma'am. The reality is that there's a finite number of dollars in the motor license fund. You have the numbers there. If we were to direct additional funds to municipalities, and my guess is PSATs would be all for that. If you wanted to direct additional funds to counties, the County Commissioners Association would be all for that. But it will come at the expense of the Fayette County projects that we have in our network because they're the same funds.
So switching gears, there's a lot of discussion right now about fraud, waste, and abuse in government. What is PennDOT doing to internally detect and eliminate, or at least reduce, instances of fraud, waste, and abusive spending?
Yeah, I've been in government a long time, and I have heard fraud, waste, and abuse for a long time, and I think it's important to pay close attention to make sure that does not happen. So if the reality is for me and for the leaders at PennDOT, we will do everything possible working with any partner to make sure that any instance of waste, fraud, and abuse, and fraud by its very word is a criminal act. If there is a criminal action that I'm aware of, the proper authorities will be notified. When it comes to waste and abuse, they're sort of nebulous terms in a way, but I think we know what that means. And we, as the leaders of PennDOT, on behalf of the governor, will highlight and minimize and eliminate every instance of waste and abuse.
Does PennDOT have any internal protocols in place to deal with instances where officials or government employees are using taxpayer-funded resources such as equipment, vehicles, or any resource for personal gain? And what are the consequences if that type of misuse and violation of the public trust is found?
That'd be a criminal act potentially, and it would also be a summarily dismissed offense if somebody were to utilize state assets and state funds for personal use. That would rise to a very serious level.
And isn't it true that PennDOT currently owns one aircraft?
Yes.
And isn't it true that a Spotlight article did a very thorough analysis of the governor's personal use of that state-owned airplane to do multiple personal things, such as he took it to New York to give a commencement address at the University of Rochester. He took 2 different trips. One was a Phillies playoff game. Another was to attend a Penn State football game. The Pennsylvania aircraft has been to Hilton Head to pick up and retrieve the governor. Aren't these instances where the governor himself has used a taxpayer-funded resource for his own personal benefit?
I don't believe so. If my suspicion is somewhere along the way you'll be invited to give a commencement address as well, and you'll utilize a state car or get reimbursed for your personal car potentially. So I have no concern whatsoever with respect to the governor's use of the state plane.
I can most assuredly
Thank the gentlelady.
assure you
Time
that I
has
will not
expired.
use
Thank the
taxpayer-funded equipment.
You will not overtalk me, or it will be the last time you talk. Thank you. I give latitude to everybody, Democrat and Republican. I've done it for 3 years that I've chaired this committee. The gentleman had questions. I let him go on with his questions over his time. Everybody will be respectful, or we will not do it. I try to call balls and strikes. That goes for both sides. I expect a certain amount of respect while we're here doing this. Representative Khan, you are next.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. And thank you, Secretary Carroll. Really appreciate your leadership, the Department of Transportation.
You're kind, thank you.
I also appreciate the governor's and also this chamber's attention to making sure that we have public transit funding and having a steady stream of funding. Public transit is safe. And unfortunately, though, there have been incidents on public transit, like on the 23 bus, which goes through my community. We had, of course, a worker from TWU 234, Bernard Gribben, who was murdered on the 23 while doing his job. We also had a Roxborough student, Randy Mills, who was killed on the 23 bus. And last session, Representative Hohenstein and I, we worked on a bill that would be a transit public safety grant program that would help transit workers and help agencies make their transit even safer. We had heard that the Department of Transportation was considering a similar program, which would be a grant program that would allow transit agencies to get this funding to these agencies to focus on safety grants. Is this something that you all are still looking at and may consider?
We are looking at an additional grant program to try and beef up the security and the safety at transit authorities across the state, not just SEPTA. With respect to SEPTA, it's worth noting that they have hired additional police officers to enhance safety on their assets. And this General Assembly last session enacted a bill that created a special prosecutor for Philadelphia and SEPTA. And, you know, to the extent that the special prosecutor can be supportive of that, you know, enhancing safety in the SEPTA served communities, you know, I'm eager to see that.
Thanks for that program. The workers from ATU 85 and also TW 234, I know that's something that they would really feel happy to have. So thank you for considering that.
And those folks have really hard jobs. You know, when you're operating a bus or you're serving the public, not just at SEPTA, but any of our transit agencies across the state, you're dealing with some really tough circumstances sometimes. There are social problems galore in major cities across this nation, not just Philadelphia. And so the folks that meet the needs of serving the community as a SEPTA bus driver have a tremendous, difficult job. I value the work that they do. They deserve to be work in a safe environment, and that should be a common goal for all of us.
Thank you. My last question is, last session, we passed a bill that would actually allow municipalities, that would allow a very limited speed camera program. And that's something that I hear all the time from my constituents. How can we slow cars down? How can we get more of these speed cameras? And that's something that I'm interested and would be interested in expanding that program. Can you talk about speed cameras generally and how they are helpful, and whether that might be something that we may be able to do, well, depending on what we do here, but something that PennDOT would look to support us helping get more speed cameras across the Commonwealth?
So you're going to have to run a bill and get it to the governor's desk to expand what we're currently doing, but I'm proud of the work that's done in our work zones with our work zone cameras and the work that's done in Philadelphia and other communities. Roosevelt Boulevard, of course, is a prime example of the effort to try and provide a safer route with red light cameras and speed cameras. And Chair Nielsen and others, Chair Benninghoff, advanced legislation that provided additional opportunities for those sorts of assets in Philadelphia primarily in an effort to meet the challenges that you're describing.
Thank you, Secretary. And also thanks to Chairman Nielsen for his great work on the committee. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Secretary. So I represent Lawrence County, and despite what my colleagues have said, District 11 is the best that you have.
Thank you for that.
And I so appreciate.
I'm sure they're watching, so I'm sure that Jason and his team at District 11 will be pleased to hear that.
No, they're always very responsive, and I do appreciate their assistance. I want to switch gears a little bit to the Turnpike Commission.
Okay.
Because as PennDOT Secretary, you sit on the board.
Correct.
And Act 112 of 2022 was signed into law in November of 2022. One of the key provisions of this law was to assist the Commission's efforts to hold accountable those who didn't pay their tolls. Specifically, the Act updated the criteria that would prompt vehicle registration suspensions by lowering the dollar threshold from $500 to $250 in unpaid tolls and fees. And then it also lowered the number of unpaid tolls by plate invoices or violations from 6 to 4. It would extend the statute of limitations for unpaid invoices or violations from 3 to 5 years.
Well, thank you for highlighting this. That was my bill.
Okay.
And it was my bill. It was the Carroll language that was enacted that got to a suspension of vehicle registration sooner for unpaid tolls.
Awesome.
And so that was a step that was embraced by the Turnpike and the state police and the members of the General Assembly at the time that I served in an effort to try and be more aggressive to get toll avoiders to get to a suspended registration of the vehicle.
So having said that, can you provide us an update on where we're at on the collection of those tolls, as well as the unpaid debt that still is outstanding?
So the number rounded is about $140 million a year of avoided tolls. What you need to know is about half of that is from other residents of other states. And so we have no reciprocity agreements with our neighboring states, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, West Virginia, and so on. They have chosen not to engage in a regimen to suspend registrations for non-paid tolls. I would be willing to take a meeting with any of those states today in an effort to try and get them to be as aggressive as we are with in-state people when it comes to toll avoidance. So work to do there with the other states. The Turnpike collects about 93% of our tolls. That's among the leaders among toll agencies across the nation. There are always going to be people that avoid the toll, that they don't mind having a vehicle registration suspension. You know well, I'm sure, that folks drive with a suspended driver's license from time to time. There are people that are just rule breakers. And so I don't think there's a world where we're going to have 100% collection of every toll, but the Turnpike will continue to be as aggressive as possible in coordination with the state police. This chamber last year passed another bill that was aggressive with respect to license plate flippers. Believe it or not, there are devices that exist to flip a license plate to avoid the toll. So, you know, if there are other steps that this General Assembly can take to be more aggressive in that space, I would welcome it. I know that the Turnpike takes seriously the responsibility to collect as many tolls as possible, but when we suspend the registration and then they can end up with a suspended driver's license if they're convicted of driving with a suspended reg, at some point there you exhaust your opportunities to be able to collect. But we will continue. There are civil actions taken in magistrates' courts for folks that don't pay their tolls. You know, you have instances with trucking companies that exist today and don't exist tomorrow, and the tolls that they avoided sort of evaporate with the dissolving of the corporate entity. So there are challenges galore. But the Turnpike, those of us on the board and the leadership at the Turnpike will continue to do everything possible to make sure that folks pay their tolls. The number has ticked up if you did a close examination, but I would remind you that the tolls also tick up. So a toll today for a 50-mile run on the Turnpike is more expensive than it was 4 years ago. And so by the very nature of the toll regiment the Turnpike has, the uncollected tolls are ticking up. But that's more a reflection of the increased tolls than it is unpaid toll people just in terms of their individual drivers.
And just briefly on the reciprocity issue, do we work with other states?
We have
or is that
asked
common?
over and over. I'm sorry, you mean in terms of reach out to them to ask them to suspend registrations?
Yes, you said they're typically not working with us.
They choose. It's an aggressive step that Pennsylvania has taken with respect to. We suspend a registration, as you correctly noted, with the Carroll language, for people who avoid tolls when they reach those thresholds. Other states have chosen not to do that. Now there are nuances. Delaware, for example, has a 6-year vehicle registration. You would have to wait 6 years before you could inflict the pain on somebody from Delaware if they have a registration that they just renewed. So there's, like everything else, there's a lot of nuance to all of this. But at its core, and we are working with New York. They seem to be the most willing partner at this point. New York recently agreed to do a reciprocal agreement with the New England states. We are engaged with New York at the Turnpike to try and get them to the table so that we could have a more aggressive collection by a threat of suspension of vehicle registrations in New York, but it is not for lack of trying.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Before we continue, we have visitors here from Bear Creek Elementary School in Elizabethtown. Let's wave to our young people here. What grade is this? Oh, 4th grade. I was a 4th grade teacher for 2 months. I didn't last.
Mr. Chairman, I thought when you said Bear Creek, I used to represent Bear Creek Township in Luzerne County, but it sounds like that's Bear Creek
This is
in
Elizabethtown.
Lancaster County, I'm going to guess.
I taught 4th grade for 2 months. I didn't make it. Shout out to your teacher. All right. Thanks, Bear Creek. All right. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, and your staff for being here. We greatly appreciate the work that you do. My questions might feel a little bit disjointed, but I promise there's a method to my madness here. I want to start off by talking a little bit on workforce development. Maintenance and updates and expansions of roads and bridges is a key component. We know what PennDOT does. and our trade unions tend to get a lot of the work that comes from these projects. There are also ongoing efforts to try to help our trade unions in terms of their diversity of their membership and the folks that they have. So I'm interested to know if you think that there may be a role that PennDOT can play in helping some of the trade unions in their diversification.
So the building trades are important partners for PennDOT when it comes to delivery of projects, as are all of our contractors. And to the extent that we have a qualified and well-trained workforce that represents the diversity of the state, that is a common goal for all of us at PennDOT. I would note that the Laborers Union and the Carpenters Union have been especially aggressive with respect to making sure that the diversity of their ranks reflects the diversity of our state. But more importantly than diversity is to make sure that we have a well-trained workforce as well. And there are challenges in that space. We have, because of the very low unemployment rate and the lack of qualified workers, we have gaps, not just when it comes to PennDOT, say, for example, CDL drivers in Montgomery County. There are gaps when it comes to folks that wear hard hats and vests that work for our contractors across this state. So we will continue to partner with the building trades and contractors. The Commonwealth, under the governor's leadership, has been aggressive with respect to workforce development and utilizing federal funds that could help advance the entry of folks into the world of transportation. We're currently working with community colleges and career and technical schools to advance a curriculum that will introduce folks at a younger age to opportunities in the world of transportation. And as I noted earlier, wonderful opportunities to advance your career there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to switch gears just really quickly and talk a little bit about our waterways. Allegheny County has a lot of rivers, but I want to talk specifically about the lock system, which allows for recreational boats and for commercial barges to be able to travel back and forth and up and down the rivers. I think that I read an article, there's some federal funding that has been slashed and cut to support the Army Corps of Engineers who help to sort of maintain those locks. So I wanted to know, in that scenario, are there ways that PennDOT is looking to put funding behind the maintenance of these locks, more so not just capital, but also operational funding as well?
So that's a challenge for us. I mean, to backfill federal funds, especially Army Corps funds for navigation on the Allegheny, the Monongahela River, or the Ohio River would be a financial challenge for us. The current law, specifically Act 89, directed funds for siloed funds for the 3 ports in our state, Erie, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. We work with all 3 in an effort to try and meet the needs that they have, but the current statutory funding that exists for ports would not be sufficient to backfill lost federal funds for the Allegheny or the Mon River.
Got you. Okay. Last question. Can you talk a little bit about how increased utilization in public transportation is actually beneficial to lowering greenhouse gas emissions in the Commonwealth?
Well, sure. Putting 40 people on a bus is obviously better for the environment and for the atmosphere than 40 people in 40 cars. So I think that speaks for itself. And the challenges with climate are real. And so PennDOT, along with our other sister state agencies, will continue to advance transportation opportunities that meet the needs of folks where they are, but also reflect the needs to be sensitive to the challenges that we have when it comes to the environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Flood.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Carroll, for being here today, and all of your team. I'm happy to have you. Election integrity is something that I have been working on back at home in Northampton County, but also here in the legislature. And so my question to you is regarding the voter registration appropriation or motor voter. The increase is $300,000, which is a whopping 39.5% as a cost to carry. I understand that voter registration and education initiatives are really important in a presidential election year, and we did have a very robust turnout last year. But why are we talking about a 39.5% increase in a municipal election year for fiscal year 25-26?
So I'll let Chuck Zimmerman, who does the real math, answer the question with respect to the 300,000 and the percentages. I would offer that having people registered to vote every year is important, not just in a presidential election year. And the registration, voter registration regiment that was advanced by the governor resulted in a whole slew of new folks becoming registered to vote in this past election. I would offer more new registered Republicans than registered Democrats. I suspect that you'd celebrate that more than me. But the reality is we have more people registered to vote, which at its core is a good thing. When it comes to the granular numbers here, I'll let Chuck take that one.
So that is a reimbursement. It's constitutionally, we can't spend middle license fund for non-highways and bridges, so it's a reimbursement from the general fund. And the actual calculation is just, it's an increase in salary and other costs, but I think the biggest change was normally it would take 2 minutes. Now it's taking longer, 3 minutes, so that 2 to 3 is that 60% increase, or 33% increase. But it's all just a recalculation and reimbursement.
Okay. And regarding the automatic voter registration, was that not supposed to save the Commonwealth money?
I'm not sure how I suppose everything is interrelated, and if somebody's registering to vote at a PennDOT facility and not going to a county courthouse, there's probably some map there that would be beyond my ability to try and calculate. Having people registered to vote should be something that we all celebrate. And so when folks show up at a driver's license center, that is far more convenient than getting in a car and finding a parking spot at the Luzerne County Courthouse.
So I got a lot of calls in my office from constituents that were really concerned about this automatic voter registration. So maybe you can help answer, what kind of controls does PennDOT use to ensure that lawful citizens are, who are being registered to vote with the Commonwealth when applying for or renewing licenses or identification cards? How can you ensure that these are lawful citizens that are doing that?
So I'm going to let Kara Templeton answer this one because she has granular knowledge on this, but I know that the regiment was tested over and over. We had opportunities for members of the House and Senate, particularly Senator Dush had serious concerns about all this, and he had a chance to firsthand witness how this was all done. I'm not sure it satisfied every concern that he had, but he was appreciative of the opportunity. But Kara, if you can walk through the steps necessary to make sure that folks that are not registering to vote that are not qualified.
Sure. Thank you for the question. First, I think it's important to note that Pennsylvania is a legal present state in that we can only issue products to individuals that are legally present. When individuals who are not citizens but are legally present obtain a driver's license or identification card, we will put on there what is called an indicator, just to show that this individual is legally present. We check that information with federal systems to make sure that the documentation that they provide is valid. So there's that process. When an individual then goes to get their photo taken, the photo system will see if there's that indicator on the card that they present to get their photo. If there is a legal presence indicator that would show that they're not a citizen, those questions for the voter registration application screens are not even presented to the customer. So that's one item. Another item is for those individuals who are citizens that get the voter registration application screens, they then have to answer a series of questions, and they're asked multiple times in that process to verify and affirm that they are, in fact, a citizen and meet the voting registration eligibility requirements.
Okay, well, thank you very much. These are great answers to a lot of questions that my constituents had, and I appreciate your time.
And those are fair questions, and I understand. I would have had constituents like that as well. I can tell you that we are not interested in breaking the law, and if somebody is legally present in Pennsylvania but not a citizen, they will not become a voter at a PennDOT facility.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary, thank you for being here yet again into this great chamber. Welcome back. First off, I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, your whole team, your department, on the 309 Connector project. in my district. We've toured that, and the progress is coming along very nicely, so I want to thank you for that. And to the speed that District 6 is working on it as well, really do thank you. I want to ask a question first, and then I'm going to ask about a couple other things within the area I represent. So one of the questions that has come up within my district office, and we've actually dealt with this many times, is dealing with complaints about the lengthy processing time for interlock systems and trying to get them out. So I wanted to ask, there's some delays that happen within PennDOT, bureaucratic delays with regard to getting those interlocks approved or taken out of someone's car. I wanted to ask what is PennDOT's approach to reducing the processing time for interlocks, and how can PennDOT's system be modernized to reduce the time?
The vehicle code needs to be updated in this space. It is a process that is not working well. There is a team dedicated to recommending changes to the vehicle code led by Judge Barres from Lackawanna County, among others. Chair Nielsen and Chair Benninghoff in the House have language that speaks to this issue. The regiment when it comes to installation of ignition interlock, the removal of the ignition interlock, getting somebody restored from a suspension is very, very complicated. I like to think that I have a grasp of how PennDOT things work in the world of DV, driver license and vehicle services. I am at a loss most of the time to figure out whether or not somebody qualifies for one of the ignition interlock licenses, and if so, when, and how do they do that? And if they don't own a vehicle, that makes it even more complicated. That needs to be addressed. I'm hopeful that when Chair Nielsen or whoever he assigns the bill to advances it, you'll take a close look at it. That section of the vehicle code needs to be updated.
Thank you for that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about two pieces of legislation that have been coming through that have been proposed last session, will be proposed again this session, I'm assuming. The statewide expansion of the automated red light enforcement camera program, so that way it's not just within communities where, to be honest with you, the current law goes off of a census count from 2010. Last I checked, it's 2025 now. 15 years later, we're still utilizing the census data from 15 years ago. I wanted to ask what you think the process and potential could be to get that program expanded statewide, and piggybacking off of that for the automated speed enforcement program as well. We're utilizing that in portions of the city of the first class in Philadelphia. And I have communities in my own area that have been expressing interest in wanting to have those systems put in place to help them with speed enforcement, and also to minimize interaction between law enforcement and the individual. If it's an automated program, an automated system, multiple states around us use this. I wanted to see what your thoughts are on that and if you're supportive of those things.
It's pretty hard to comment on a bill that hasn't been introduced yet. I would say that, when it comes to any of these safety-related measures, we're happy to have the conversation, happy to take a look at it, happy to meet with you and others that may be interested in moving a bill like that.
I appreciate that. Hopefully we can actually get this moved. I know that there are sections of roadway, especially along the Route 309 corridor, heading in straddling between Bucks and Montgomery County, where there are areas that have had multiple crashes, multiple high-speed incidents that have occurred. The District 6 and PennDOT has been very supportive in trying to lower speeds in those areas to control traffic and to keep people safe. But I do know that the law enforcement agencies within my district and also in other counties have been asking for this as well, and some assistance in keeping those speeds down. So I hope to see progress in that. I know Chairman Nielsen's here, and I hope to see that this actually get passed and passed into law. So I want to thank you for that.
One other legislative remedy may be radar for local police as well. That's been kicked around in this building for a very long time. Only state in the nation that does not have such a thing.
Oh, for local radar as well. That has been asked of me as well. So one of those other things we're hoping to get done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here this morning, and to your team for the work that they do for the Commonwealth every day. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my district constituents. Obviously, PennDOT issues are very important to them. So I'm in my second term, And my very first teletown hall was with our region PennDOT representative to talk about some of the projects that were going on in our area. And I will tell you that I learned a lot in that process because of some of the feedback I received from constituents that, you know, just generally have a feeling like they appreciate what PennDOT is doing. They don't know, they don't see all of the things maybe that your staff does in terms of everything that's going into all of the road work and all the projects throughout our region. But I just wanted to share that, you know, people are seeing their tax money going to all of these projects, and oftentimes we're on the receiving end of complaints when people don't know, you know, what was happening in their area. For instance, in my district office is located in the dead center of Richboro. This is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And when 2nd Street Pike, which is a main road in the area, was being milled and paved and relined, and there were lane changes, we were not notified. And so our township didn't tell anyone. We didn't tell anyone because I didn't know until I literally rode my car out to go to my district office. And so I think that those types of instances sometimes create that perception. And so I think poor communication is part of it. Some of the roads just taking longer because of shortages, whether they be at the contractor level or staff level. And so I just wanted to see if you could comment on just, you know, generally for people at home, if they're watching, on like, you know, what is your response to that? And then how can they know that the PennDOT dollars that their taxes are going towards are really being used in an efficient manner?
So when it comes to PennDOT projects generally, there are really two different ways that dollars are spent in the road and bridge world that you're describing. Maintenance actions that are taken by PennDOT forces or contractors, and then projects that would be more substantial, for example, a bridge replacement or a highway project, and they would exclusively be done by contractors. When it comes to projects like that, the larger projects, our planning partners, in your case, DVRPC, is essentially the traffic control folks that help queue up projects, as do planning partners that we have in every county in this state. So PennDOT, working with our planning partners, essentially sets the table for projects that we will deliver in DVRPC's case, the 5-county southeastern Pennsylvania region. When it comes to maintenance projects, I will make sure that we are more aggressive in outreach. I know that projects are announced by the district and that there's a website, of course, that people can go to, but I will have the District 6 folks reach out to you to make sure that the lack of communication that you're describing
I do appreciate that, and I did share that feedback with them, and their response to me was that, well, there was a press release sent on it, and when we checked, there actually wasn't a press release. But the point is like, I agree with you. There's definitely room for improvement. I appreciate that. I know how difficult it is. But I also was wondering, as a follow-up to this, because I know I only have so much time today, if you guys could provide a list of like how many projects, maintenance projects across the state are delayed, because I know there are some in my district that keep getting bumped from year to year, and people will come to my office and say, when is this road getting paved? And it just keeps moving. So that would be a great report. Okay. I also would love to get a report of how many vacancies are in the Southeast from, you know, just positions, whether it's contractors or employees, because I do know that from my local PennDOT contact that that's a huge problem for them. They're always trying to recruit people in our region, and I do appreciate the work that's being done, but I just think that all of these challenges are creating a problem, not only for the people that are trying to get the projects done, but our constituents who are the ones that are driving on the roads and seeing potholes that are, you know, huge and having problems just getting around day to day. And so we appreciate what you guys are doing, but I also think that all of that information would be really helpful for me so I can do a better job of explaining some of the challenges. And then finally, because I know we're running out of time, if you could also provide information on Real ID, if you guys think that you're able to actually implement that by the May 7th date that we've been told.
So the Real ID deadline is this May. From what we hear from our federal partners, there'll be a soft enforcement. So if somebody shows up at an airport, for example, and doesn't have the Real ID, they're probably going to end up on the flight, probably, but our federal partners will dictate those terms. At this point, about 25% of Pennsylvanians have the Real ID. Every single Pennsylvanian has had an opportunity to make a decision because they've all renewed their driver's license since this all started. In some cases, have had more than one opportunity to make this decision. My suspicion is when TSA and our federal partners get real with the Real ID enforcement, there are going to be bad days at airports for some folks that show up there without a Real ID and don't have a passport. I'm not looking forward to that day. So we will, PennDOT is being as aggressive as possible with outreach and Real ID pop-up centers to try and get people Real ID. The numbers are ticking up as people come closer to the May deadline. And so we're going to continue in that regard. We look forward to your help.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it seems like today has been beat up on SEPTA and ignore PRT day, so I appreciate you actually acknowledging that PRT exists. But I do want to talk a little bit about, there are other public transit authorities that exist in Pennsylvania, correct?
Every single county has transit.
And under the governor's budget proposal, the increases actually proportionately benefit those smaller transit authorities more than PRT or SEPTA.
The formula is statutory, and the dollars are driven based on the formula.
Okay, thank you. My district office did a peeling license plate event just recently, and after the event, we learned that when the new plates are issued, the old plates are marked as dead in the system, but it could be up to 2 weeks before an individual would actually receive the new license plate. So does the department have anything in place to protect drivers who may be pulled over because of this dead license plate before they receive their new one, or any information that's sent out to those drivers? Because we didn't have any information to provide to them to let them know that that might be an issue.
Yeah, I'll let Kara speak to the nuances here. There's no perfection when it comes to doing what you're describing, and I don't know how we can do that in real time when a legislative office is going to do a license plate replacement program, and which I value. Getting those sheeting peeled plates off the road is a good thing for everybody. So, Kara, if you can share steps that we're taking to try and minimize the lag there.
Sure. So we have been working closely with law enforcement, making sure that they have the information that they need to understand this process. Law enforcement's aware that they're to physically look at the plate, run it, and know to look for that type of information, and also to know that that situation could be with this specific customer that they pulled over in that traffic stop could be in. If your office needs additional information, we'll be happy to share that.
Is information indicated in the driver file at all for that plate that it was marked as dead because it's being replaced?
I'd have to get the specifics for you as to what indicators there are in the system. I do want to clarify that it would not be tied to the driver system, it would be in the vehicle registration system. But why don't I follow up on that and get you additional information?
Okay, thank you. Last year we talked about the interlock licenses and the interlock system and the difficulty that many drivers have had in terms of navigating that system, having systems put in, having them removed. Is there anything that has changed in the last year to make that process more streamlined to help folks navigate that?
So as I said earlier, Judge Brace from Lackawanna and others have been working on language that would change those sections of the vehicle code with respect to ignition interlock licenses. The language that is the product of that work is in the hands of Chair Nielsen and Chair Benninghoff, and I'm looking forward to a bill soon that would amend those sections of the vehicle code to make a tortuously complicated process easier.
Related to that, I actually have a constituent who has an interlock license, and so we got her driving record in order to confirm whether or not there was something that, whether or not there were additional restrictions on her interlock license. Is the driving record the full and complete reflection of whether or not there would be any kind of restrictions, or are there other forms that she should be seeking out to be able to get that?
Well, the driver record would dictate eligibility for a product, and then whatever you're eligible for, the appropriate forms would be completed to accomplish that. But the challenge, Representative, is the average person and even as skillful as you and your staff may be, will have a difficult time examining a driver record and then making the determination of what product, if any, that constituent qualifies for and when. It is, I have done constituent service, PennDOT stuff for a long time. It is hard for me to figure whether or not and when somebody's eligible for ignition interlock. That's why those sections of vehicle code need to be amended to make it far easier. We're not going to put people that are rightly suspended back on the road, but people who qualify for a product shouldn't have to jump through a million hoops to get it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks to Representative. Next, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You look good down there, I have to say, you know. Mr. Secretary, always a pleasure. I really appreciate your true commitment to Pennsylvania's transportation, you know, and I respect your knowledge in this arena. I know at times we may have different priorities or perspectives, and that's healthy, you know. I'd like to pick up my questioning today from where we left off last year, and specifically in the area of maternity deserts. You know, last year, the Post-Gazette had an article that we discussed. There were 6 counties in Pennsylvania where you're not able to deliver a baby. You know, ironically, February, UPMCs, just that number has increased now to 9 counties. You know, the governor's prioritizing public transportation. Has the administration over this past year addressed in any way this issue of growing maternity care deserts from a transportation perspective?
I would offer that the governor's transit proposal and any work that we do on our road and bridge network that makes it easier for expecting moms to get to where they need to be is in our common interest. So when it comes to transportation generally, you know, expecting moms have doctor's appointments with regularity, and then, of course, the big day at the end of the 9 months. It would be a sad event for me as the PennDOT secretary if there were some sort of a breakdown because of a transportation opportunity that was not met.
Yes,
that
yes.
got somebody there.
That's where, you know, Cameron County, Clarion County, Elk, Forest, Greene, Juanita, McKean, Sullivan, Wyoming are now listed as no birth centers, no OB providers, no OB doctors, 200,000 citizens, 30,000 citizens recognized to live in poverty, having 1,800 babies. I know we're going to move on, but, as we
they
move
have a
forward
shared
into
ride
this year-
opportunity, Representative. Every one of those counties that you mentioned, Clarion and the rest, have shared ride.
Yes.
That is the transit opportunity, even in rural PA. And based on that list, the counties that you noted are rural counties that have transit.
Yes,
so I
we
think
do.
it speaks to the need to make sure that we properly fund transit.
I completely agree. And that's my concern as we look at properly funding transit, because a number of my colleagues are feeling that this current formula is out of balance. And earlier you mentioned the formula itself. That was legislatively passed. Do you remember what year was that formula passed?
Act 44, 2007.
It's 2007. So a while
But
ago.
you know, Representative, when you're down the path of a formula adjustment, good luck.
Yeah,
That is the trickiest of legislative endeavors.
It is a heavier lift, but the priority, as the governor is looking to increase, you know, this would now take over 10% of all sales tax, right? Which would be almost $1.7 billion. Over $1 billion exclusively would be going to SEPTA. 82% of this proposal goes to SEPTA and Allegheny County, you know, but, you know, if we look at Scranton and Colt, they're getting less than $2 million. You know, if we were able to create a hold harmless and revise the formula moving forward, would your office support that opportunity?
Happy to take a meeting. Again, when you start down the path of changing a formula, even with a hold harmless and directing new funds, as was done with school funding, that is a complicated endeavor, but always happy to meet.
It is, and I mean, it's frustrating for us in a rural suburban area. Like in our county, a worker has to pay $4 one way to go from Greensburg to New Stanton, about 7 miles. You know, but in Allegheny County, it's free to ride the rail all over the city limits. I mean, how is that balanced from your perspective?
I don't have a seat on the PRT board or the SEPTA board or Westmoreland County Transit, so the transit agencies would have to answer specific questions related to their fee and fare structure. So I'll let them do that.
Okay, so fare structure isn't part of the balance. A member earlier asked about green energy and responsibility. Are converting diesel buses to natural gas buses, is there an incentive or addressed at all in this funding formula from 2007?
That was a P3 project that was wildly successful, and I've had a chance to visit the Erie Transit Authority, and they have a natural gas filling station there that is utilized by the Erie buses and also by the public. And so it is a success story with respect to a P3 project that was implemented years ago.
So that was a years ago project. There's nothing about incentives supporting natural gas transportation or recycled natural gas in the formula, to your knowledge?
No, it's ongoing now. I mean, the transit agencies with regularity, the transit agency, River Valley Transit in Williamsport comes to mind, that converted their fleet. That is an ongoing program.
Okay. I look forward to you as we address the formula. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Carroll. It's always good to have you here. I started off my career working for PennDOT as a lawyer, so I know the Herculean burdens in front of you, your staff, and all the people out there working on the front line. And I want to first just commend you for the work that you've been doing. We've been fixing bridges and roads at a breakneck speed, historic speed. For the public, you can look at www.penndotpa.gov/results. There's really been impressive work done. I've been very happy locally working with our new district executive to work on solutions for Route 611. Always happy to be working with Bucks County Maintenance. They've been exceptionally responsive, and they're doing incredible work with the limited resources that they have. But one of the things that my constituents always contact my office about, one of the largest percentage of concerns that I have is road maintenance. And District 6, it's the first in daily miles traveled, first in population, first in median income. But we have the second highest number of roads and bridges that are in poor condition. It's a structural problem. It's a problem that's unique to this area in regard to maintenance specifically. We're the most condensed, we're the most traveled, with the highest cost of living in the state. And we're seeing pressures with cost of living and frankly, competition from local municipalities who are able to more freely adjust their payment structure, their benefit structure, to bring people in to work on local maintenance. So this is something that I don't see being fixed by hiring fairs, because we're always going to have that structural problem of the cost of living and competition from these local municipalities until we do something about this. And these are like historic levels of vacancies that we're only 70% staffed on average. And, it could go up or down depending on, the time of the year. Maybe Chester County is worse off this year than I was last year, where Bucks County was one of the worst. But it's a Collier County problem. It's a problem that's going to spread out into Lancaster, Lebanon, Lehigh Valley possibly as well. So we're going to see this continuing to happen. And I guess it's hard for me to go back to my constituents and say you're getting 70% of what was expected. So, Representative Paoli is moving forward a study on regional pay. I've put forward a bill with several other Collier County representatives to increase the road take-back program, a program that hasn't been the increase hasn't occurred since like 2006, I think. So at least we could take some of these really high priority roads off of PennDOT's hands and put them in the hand of these maintenance departments that really have the resources. Should we consider a tax credit? Should we look at cost of living in some of our funding formulas in terms of finding ways to give more resources to these folks? Is a working group something we need? But I feel like we have to address this problem if we don't have creative solutions. And I've seen such great creativity from this department in terms of these huge issues that you're dealing with in terms of roads and bridges and this massive amount of ground that you have to cover. I'm wondering what we can do for this local maintenance issue particularly.
I value the question. You're not wrong. The math is tough when it comes to Bucks and Chester, and it has bled into Lancaster, by the way. PennDOT does not negotiate union contracts. The Office of Administration, it would be the place to start there. But if you have legislative remedies that you think would address the challenges that we have with staffing for PennDOT folks in Bucks County, I look forward to learning more about that.
Well, one of the things I hope we could do is possibly put together some type of working group to address these issues. If your department's open to that, I'd love to be contacted and at least have a point of reference for some of the representatives who have this problem, continue to have this problem, see it over and over again. So, and again, thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mostello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Secretary. How are you?
Afternoon.
You've asserted that the state has not received or has not increased funding for mass transit in the past decade. But as was mentioned earlier, mass transit already gets over 8% of our sales tax and use revenues. So in 2013, total collections were $9.13 billion. Last year, the collections totaled $14.3 billion. That's a 56% increase. So wouldn't you agree that this funding source for mass transit from the state has actually increased by 56%?
Fair enough. Percentages and math can be nuanced, as you are highlighting. And so, yes, of course, the sales tax revenue collection for the Commonwealth has increased year over year for the most part. I think there was a decline during the COVID years, but the math that you're citing is real. But when it comes to the investment by the Commonwealth in terms of a percentage, the governor seeks an additional 1.75.
Okay. And I also want to follow up on the discussion related to the allocations of the mass transit funding has been a topic the entire morning here. So under the governor's proposal, over $1 in $10 paid by Pennsylvanians in all 67 counties would go to mass transit. And we already heard that roughly half of all mass transit dollars go to SEPTA. So according to the 2020 census, population of Philadelphia and the surrounding counties totaled 4.2 million, representing roughly 1/3 of the state's population. Yet over half of all mass transit funding goes to that area. And can you really call that equitable?
I would say that it's statutory, and PennDOT delivers the funds to the transit agencies that the law demands.
So with that in the chamber in which we sit right now, with the formulas and the rewriting of the formulas, as you've mentioned earlier, that it is up to us to do, what sort of commitment can we get from you, as was stated by the representative from Westmoreland County, to discuss with you what would be acceptable for some of these changes that could be made to the formula so it could be a lot more equitable into some of the rural counties that we have, Northwest Pennsylvania, which again was mentioned by the gentleman from Westmoreland. So what kind of support can you give to make it more equitable?
Yeah, I guess equitable is in the eyes of the beholder. And so my suspicion is that your colleagues from the 5 counties of SEPTA probably think it's equitable and may even make an argument that they're getting shortchanged. But if you have ideas along with Representative Nelson and others with respect to changes to the formula, happy to have that conversation. Again, changing the formula is about as complicated as it gets because you're undoubtedly going to have winners and losers with respect to allocation of funds.
Right, but we can get a commitment from you that you're willing to sit down with us to kind of talk about some of the changes that we could.
I think you know, Representative, that I'm willing to take a meeting with anybody just about any time, and I enjoyed my visit to the Butler County Community College for your town hall.
Yes, and we do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Bellman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, with PennDOT being present in every corner of the Commonwealth, could you discuss the department's efforts in addressing the needs of minority communities, both in terms of transportation and infrastructure?
So when it comes to meeting the transportation needs of 13 million people, that is the job. And that includes people of black and brown and people who look like me. The challenges when it comes to economically disadvantaged areas, environmental justice communities, that is a conversation that's important. I have no capacity to repair decisions that were harmful to those communities, decisions made decades ago, but we will do our best to try and minimize the impacts. I offer the work that we've done in Pittsburgh and in Allegheny County and in Philadelphia, currently underway with respect to CAP projects to try and reconnect severed communities as a result of interstates that were probably misplaced with their original design and location. So when it comes to the needs, the transportation needs of 13 million people, the color of their skin matters not to me. When it comes to the economic challenge communities and black and brown communities that were harmed by decisions made decades ago, we will endeavor to remedy those as much as we can.
All right. Thank you. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. One question that I've been getting a lot from my community is about driver's education. And currently the Department of Ed has a program that reimburses schools for driver's education. That $35 reimbursement rate per student comes out of the motor licensing fund. So I just wanted to see what is the total impact of the program on PennDOT.
I'll get you the number in terms of how much we're reimbursing out of the motor license fund. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but we'll get it for you.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Benninghoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the Secretary and your staff, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate interacting. Get to see you a lot.
Thank you for your good work.
I only have a couple questions, but I did want to give a shout out to District 2. I am very grateful for the work that they do. We've recently had a town hall meeting with a borough that's very small, limited in their funds, and trying to address some safety needs, and Tom Prestash and his crew have been tremendous, and I would be remiss to not mention that and did not want to forget it as I did one other time. Two quick questions specifically. One has to do with some legislation I've introduced last time. I want to do it again now, and it's really addressing an issue that all of our members hear about, and that is when people have their license changed, their insurance changed, and next thing, a lot of times it's for switching it, not because they've lost it. They get notifications that their license has been suspended for not having that. I just got to believe in a time when technology is so adept to being able to make a purchase in New Zealand in the middle of a month, Visa gets me a bill at the end of the month, that we ought to be able to take advantage of what's going on in 17 other states and get some kind of online verification system. It's very, very frustrating because sadly some of these people don't realize that they changed their insurance, went down the road, bought a new insurance, but proactively the insurance companies only have to notify you that their insurance stopped, versus the current insurance company that they just hired does not have to proactively say they've done that. I would love to have your support, and especially when it goes to our sister chamber. They received an awful lot of bills from my colleague, Chairman Nielsen, and I last year, and a lot of them just kind of idled there. To me, this is a no-brainer, nonpartisan, and frankly, a consumer friendly kind of bill, and I'd appreciate your support on that. I don't know what your thoughts are overall, but
That proposal's been around for a long time. It makes perfect sense to me that if a insurance policy is canceled in the morning and bound an hour later with a different company, with a different agent, there should be a mechanism that would prevent the notification of the owner of the vehicle as to what's going on here. And so there hasn't been broad stakeholder support for your proposal going back in time, but I'm hopeful that there's growing momentum to get that bill to the finish line.
well, any push you can give it. We have been working with the insurance department, and they seem to be more receptive. Obviously, they have to be an important, intricate player in this. To me, it's just a no-brainer, so I appreciate you being able to support.
I hope the Insurance Federation has the same view.
Well, I apologize. I meant the Federation. Figured I might as well go to the ones that we need their endorsement. So anyhow, when it gets to our sister chamber, I could use your experience as my former minority chairman of this committee and now our great secretary. Second of all is an issue we haven't talked a whole lot about specifically. We talked a lot about mass transit, roads, and bridges, and that is parking issues for our truck drivers. You know, Pennsylvania is really in the crosshairs in a lot of north, south, east and west traffic, tractor-trailer traffic as well. What I've been trying to do is try to find where we can provide safe pull-offs for these trucks. I do have a piece of legislation I've been drafting to try to consider giving a tax credit to businesses that would provide these opportunities for them, and would also additionally like PennDOT and maybe even DGS to look at whether or not there's some utilization that we could be doing on some of our properties, especially if we have abandoned properties. I think we should be leading in this effort to try to get safe pull-offs for our truck drivers if we want them following the law and not be driving with excessive hours. And who knows, I just think that this would be safe in the long run, and wasn't sure whether or not you would consider leasing, selling, or using some type of P3 format to provide these truck pull-offs.
Happy to have that conversation. And there's always the opportunity for an unsolicited P3 to be advanced to the department. And in respect to truck parking, I'm happy to report that the current Turnpike project at Breezewood to connect the Turnpike with I-70, the realignment of those roads will include an aggressive truck parking opportunity that does not exist today. And I think that's a modest first step. The Turnpike and PennDOT, with proposals like yours, should do their level best to make sure that we have safe places for truck drivers to take a rest. I am the rarest of secretaries that has a CDL in my wallet. It is not lost on me the work that they do. And so collective efforts to advance truck parking is a worthy conversation.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, and congratulations on CDL. As probably the only former coroner in this chamber, I also probably think about things a little bit differently. And you know, we have a lot of good truckers going across this state, both internal and external from other states, but they're pushing a limit. Time's of the essence. Mr. Chairman, if you'd indulge me with one other quick question. We've talked about a lot of different issues today. One thing that I've been thinking about, and obviously it's been in the news a lot, and I think is worthy of our discussion, is what are we doing as a state in reference to aviation? There's a lot of new members in this chamber. If my math is correct, maybe close to 100 out of 203 in the last 4 years. So I think there's a lot of void in that knowledge, as well as even on our own committee. While most people look at aviation funding as a federal issue, I'm curious of where we are as a state, where our commitment is specific to safety. You know, when I saw the latest crash and a plane coming in, it looked like it was making a great landing, and suddenly it flips over. It just was mind-boggling and made me a little more apprehensive even wanting to fly. But I do know that I've had more chatter in my district about this, and I think in just common conversations, even with families. What do you guys do as a state? What are we doing? Are we investing enough on safety, maintenance, airport expansion, even some of the smaller ports in some of our rural communities? And frankly, I felt a little remiss being able to answer that adequately. So I was curious of where you feel we are as a state. Is this something we might be increasing or looking into more in result of some of the events we've seen tragically happening across the country?
So we have a wide aviation network across our Commonwealth, including in many rural counties. And they have tremendous needs that they seek to fill with a request for PennDOT grant funds that are generated as a result of the tax on jet fuel.
Correct.
You may not like this next part, but the amount of money available this next year will be less than the current year because of the declining revenue from the jet fuel tax because of the decline in the price per gallon of jet fuel. So there's no floor when it comes to jet fuel tax. It's a percentage of the wholesale price. Yeah, so the shorthand, there's going to be less money available for PennDOT's grants to small airports because of the declining revenue. There was a legislative proposal somewhere along the way to establish a floor, to establish 3 cents a gallon or somewhere thereabouts. Pennsylvania's jet fuel taxes is the lowest of the states in the Mid-Atlantic region. Most states are 3 or 4 pennies more than we are per gallon. So, you know, we have a very low jet fuel tax. And so the small airports, including those in Center County and Juniata and Mifflin that you're familiar with, and others across the state, have an appetite for additional aprons, hangars, fences, paving that we cannot satisfy with the current revenue that we have.
Well, I was aware of the decrease in that, and that's why I raised this issue. I think you and I are both well adept to the fact that if an accident happens, nobody's going to want to hear our excuses, going to know why we didn't do something from a preventive perspective. So I did entertain having a meeting maybe with our committee, both the chairman and myself, and maybe discuss this further because it's an ongoing issue. And frankly, aviation to me is going to continue to be an expanding way of moving goods and people. And I'd like to make sure that as a Commonwealth, we are being proactive on that.
You'd have many airport directors in many counties across the state would be eager to have that conversation as well.
Well, I'll let Chairman Nielsen know that. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you to staff for all
Thank you
help.
for your good work on the committee, Representative. It's a pleasure to work with you and your team to advance our common interests.
Well, I'm following you in your shoes in your old position, and when you want to relinquish that one, I'll be glad to continue to follow you. Just kidding.
I'm good for the moment.
We're glad to have you there.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure they'd welcome me in Center County as much as they did in Lackawanna, Luzerne.
I don't know what's happening right now, but okay. Representative Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good to see you again. You were actually in Reading in the summertime where we had a packed house talking about mass transit and the train, which is something I'm going to get to in a second. Secretary Carroll, there seems to be a perception in this body and amongst some of the members of the other side of the aisle that the only mass transit in Pennsylvania is SEPTA. Isn't it true, Mr. Secretary, that there are mass transit agencies across all 67 counties?
Yes, I think I've said that a handful of times today, and there are transit options in every county in this state.
So would you also agree that many of those, or if not the majority of those transit agencies are just like SEPTA, looking at either raising rates and or cutting services throughout the 67 transit agencies?
They all have challenges. PRT will be in a similar position as SEPTA is, and other transit agencies in the queue behind them, some sooner, some not so a few years down the road, but all face challenges, yes.
And it's been 10 years since we've done anything for mass transit funding. Is that also correct?
Correct.
So, you know, it really bothers me in this body when we tend to focus on one particular mass transit agency when I have a mass transit agency in my backyard in Barta that is cutting services, that's meeting the needs of a largely Latino population in the city of Reading. And you know what? They need some funds as well, too. So I'm hopeful that we can get past this one-sidedness and actually focus on the bigger picture. Mr. Secretary, I want to now pivot now, of course, to the train. I know you spoke about it earlier, but of course, we got some recent news in the city of Reading that was a little disheartening in regards to our trajectory towards the train. I had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with representatives from Amtrak where they informed me that they are canceling the bus line service from Reading to Philadelphia in the next 90 days. They cited low ridership as some of the issues, and of course, you know, a lot of the critics, myself included, you know, believe that putting that on ridership was really creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of really underinvestment. And quite frankly, I question whether or not Amtrak really had a true commitment in wanting to keep the service alive. So, Mr. Secretary, I know you talked about the department's and the governor's commitment to the rail line, but what can you tell the people of the city of Reading that have been waiting 40 years to bring the rail line back, and now that we had this opportunity in front of us, it may be fleeting from us once again?
I can tell you that the governor and myself are as supportive of the Reading to Philadelphia passenger rail initiative as we are with Scranton to New York, as we are with Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. We consider them equally important. We will do everything in our power and have thus far in coordination with the folks in those three arenas to advance their projects on a federal level, but the decisions will be made in Washington, D.C., not in Harrisburg.
And so let's say hypothetically, and of course we don't deal in hypotheticals, but let's say that we lose our funding on the federal level. What happens to the project?
I'm going to, that would be, if you're suggesting that the Commonwealth can backfill federal funds when it comes to passenger rail, that would require a legislative remedy that would be outside of the ability of myself or the governor to just direct those funds. You're talking about a big money here.
Real big money.
When it comes to passenger rail, Scranton to New York, including New Jersey, and Reading to Philadelphia.
So
it's complicated.
Big money, no doubt, and of course, money that would be very difficult to get from this General Assembly. And so, in other words, without the federal government's assistance, in my opinion, that project is pretty much dead.
I think you could say that for all three.
And so, again, for a community like mine that has been underserved and it's a growing Latino population and community has been starved for mass transit for over the last 40 years, I'm finding it very difficult to give my community a sense of what the plan is moving forward. And so obviously I know you don't have all the answers, but again, if you could just drill down a little bit more deeply in terms of what your commitment is to ensuring that the Reading line from Reading to Philly is brought into fruition, and what else the department can do in terms of helping the city of Reading meet our transportation needs, whether it's through rail, whether it's through bus line services, or any of the above.
I will continue my advocacy in Washington, D.C. with our federal representatives in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. I will continue my advocacy with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, and any other agency that has a say in this. The actions that are underway in Washington, D.C. over the last month or so are concerning, but there undoubtedly will have to, the decisions will have to crystallize, and I hope that that will result in a positive direction when it comes to passenger rail for all three of our projects in Pennsylvania.
I wish I shared your optimism, Mr. Secretary. Thank you so much for your time.
We thank the gentleman, Representative Siegel.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Carroll, for joining us here again today. I want to start just briefly just touching on SEPTA, and I say this as a member who is from the Lehigh Valley and quite obviously does not have the privilege of representing the SEPTA system. And we've talked about it today. We've alluded to it. We know that the southeast portion of the state represents 41% of its economic activity, about 32% of its population on just 5% of its land. But I think this is the most important aspect of all of it, is that the Southeast is responsible for generating nearly 40% of all the tax revenue here in our Commonwealth. And I'm wondering if you could comment, not just in your role as Secretary of Transportation, but also your previous tenure as a state representative, the damage it would do to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and all the other priorities I believe we share as representatives here in the legislature in the form of earned income tax credits and property tax rent rebates for so many hardworking people across the state if we were to jeopardize the reliability of public transit in the Southeast, and what that would mean for our ability to deliver for our constituents no matter where they live.
You are correct. And I will add simply that when the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce says it's critically important for SEPTA to be adequately funded, I take them at their word.
And in your assessment, if we were to fail to follow through on our commitments and our obligations to SEPTA, it would most certainly jeopardize the economic vitality of the Southeast and throw the state's economy into turmoil.
Undoubtedly.
Thank you. Second question. I think all too often we forget to talk about public transit not just as an investment in the economy, but more importantly, a way to save taxpayers money, specifically in the form of how they get to and from important appointments. And the Public Transportation Association says that public transit saves the average citizen $13,000 a year, about $1,100 monthly, because as we well know, for anybody who owns an automobile, it's the second largest expense after housing when it comes to our annual expenses. We spend about 16 cents on every dollar maintaining our car. Can you talk a little bit about the value of public transit as a way to address the cost of inflation by making sure hardworking Pennsylvanians don't have to spend their money on Ubers or expensive means of transportation when they could use the train or the bus?
There's no doubt. Transportation, whether it's roads and bridges or transit, it requires a subsidy and government support. And so the investment that we make with respect to transit, as we make with roads and bridges, has many direct and indirect benefits to every resident of our state.
And is it your assessment that when we invest in public transit all across the Commonwealth, rural, suburban, and urban, that is helping address the bite of inflation by making sure folks have a low-cost, affordable means of getting to work, getting to their doctor, getting to their kids to school?
Of course.
Thank you. Final question, and really more of a comment as well. Look, I think all too often we talk in this body in a way of zero-sum mentality. Too often we pit people against each other where they reside or pit organizations against each other. I respect the work that all of our secretaries have to do because you're really tasked with marshaling the resources we provide you and doing the best to stretch every dollar that you can. And I have a yes-and mentality because I think we should be funding SEPTA and making sure that we make our commitment to the Southeast, and we should also be investing money in regions like my own, the Lehigh Valley, with supplemental appropriations to take into consideration places that are experiencing sustained and long-term population growth. I don't live in Pike County. Frankly, I've never been to Pike County, but I care about whether or not a single mother in Pike County can get to the grocery store, get to her job. I care whether or not a veteran in Beaver County can go get the necessary health care that they need. And so here's my question to you. it's to me a lot like we're standing before somebody in the desert, thirsty as hell, and we're holding the bucket of water and saying, "Why are you so thirsty?" In your assessment, this body has the obligation or responsibility to provide you with more resources so that if we actually want to make sure folks in rural counties can not spend $4 getting back and forth as opposed to condemning and criticizing folks who live in Pittsburgh where their Department of Health and Human Services decided to make the investment to make sure that folks could ride transit at no cost, is that not our responsibility as a legislature? If we want to put up or shut up, could we not allocate additional dollars and make sure that we can make all of those investments?
The appropriations bills initiate in the House. They have to be approved by the House and Senate before they land on the governor's desk.
Right. So the frustration with, say, the existing formula as it stands, it's a matter of dollars in and dollars out. If we want to address those perceived inequities, could this body not choose to prioritize public transit to a higher degree and just put more money in?
Sure.
Well, thank you, and I think that settles all my questions. Thank you, Secretary Carroll.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kozarowski.
Thank you, and welcome everybody from PennDOT today. It's very nice to see you all. It's nice to see my friend Meredith here on the House floor again. Thank you. And I would be remiss if I did not do a shout out to my district, number 4, and Jonathan Everly, and all the great work you do in PennDOT. So thanks for the spectacularly stunning work you do for all the constituents that I represent. So thank you very much. My question to you, and hello, Mr. Secretary. My question to you is, I think it was spoken a little earlier by Representative Barton, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that decoupling money that in our budget that was, and I wanted you to be able to kind of highlight where those fundings, that $125 million, where do you spend, where are you allowed to spend that money now, and highlight that.
So we with the General Assembly's support, with the passage of the first 2 budgets, we decoupled $125 million each year for the first 2 years. So that total of $250 million in the second year plus $125 million in the first year. The totality of that is $375 million. What I decided to do upon becoming secretary, it became clear to me when I visited all 67 county maintenance offices that the PennDOT fleet was in need of upgrade. And so we dedicated $25 million in year 1 and $25 million in year 2 to raise the allocation to our fleet from $41 million a year to $91 million a year. That is a direct benefit to every single county maintenance office in our state. When I say the fleet, think in terms of new trucks and new loaders and snow blowers and crew cabs, the very assets that we need to be able to meet the needs of people in every county in our state. And then the balance of the money was equally divided between construction and maintenance projects. Admittedly, we're not building too many bridges over the Ohio River with $100 million or $50 million, but we made a difference when it came to the network that we have in improving the network, again, across all 67 counties. So the decoupling of that $375 million had a positive, meaningful impact. I'm thankful for the governor's leadership and equally thankful for the General Assembly's aggressive support to raise the number from $100 million that was offered by the governor's first budget proposal to $125 million.
Well, thank you. The winter that we are having here in the Commonwealth, I do see the PennDOT trucks on the road, so I'm grateful for all the work that they're doing.
Well, that's worth noting, and just for a fair warning to everyone, PennDOT's winter budget is going to be exceeded this year. We allocate funds based on a rolling 5-year average of funds expended for winter maintenance. We are past the allocated monies for winter maintenance in every county in the state today. That additional snow and winter effort that we have to meet between now and the end of the winter will be a reduction in the maintenance abilities that we have in the summer. So in the years when we have a light winter, we have additional funds that we can direct to maintenance activities in the summer. This year will be the opposite because of the nature of the winter that we've had. So challenges ahead. But the decoupling of $50 million as offered by the governor will help backfill a lot of that. The allocation of funds to the fleet that I noted will not continue. It doesn't need to go higher than it is now. So we have challenges as a result of the winter. PennDOT meets those challenges, and if it snows tonight in any county in the state, we'll be ready.
Well, thank you. And I do like the new green lights on the PennDOT trucks. They're nice.
That was a bill that was passed by this General Assembly, and I'm thankful for it. Keeping our PennDOT and our contractors safe is in our common interest.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Secretary. Thank you for being here today, and it's always good to see the entire group with you. And I'm honored to sit on the Transportation Committee. This is a question that I've asked before in a hearing when we had it with the Chairman of Transportation out in the northeast of Philadelphia, but it really is centered around the traffic enforcement corridor. PA currently has made some really strong solutions that are in play around traffic enforcement, particularly in school zones. One of the things that continues to be an issue in my district where I serve in Delaware County, and with my 2 school districts, is that my particular district is covered by about 5 state roads. When I've talked to some of the school board directors in one of the districts where I serve and I currently live, it's often brought up that, you know, our children can't get bused if they are not within 1.9. If they're right under 2 miles, they can't get a bus. But we have 1st through 5th grade walking an extremely busy corridor to get to school. And not to mention, the workforce is low where we can hire crossing guards and the funding. So I was just wondering, you know, we've gotten cameras on our school buses. We've been able to do some of those things. But we know that even with the cameras on the school buses, we've seen folks that I think forgot about their driver's ed lessons to know that you need to stop when a school bus has stopped. Does that mean three lanes on one side, 3 lanes on another side, a bus is stopped and you need to stop because that child might need to get across all 6 lanes? I just want to know how PennDOT is going to continue to partner with school districts and our communities on how to keep our children safer. Right now, we don't have a lot of solutions because of what I said with crossing guards. We see young children walking up heavily trafficked roads, and it's dangerous.
So there's a lot there. You know, the school funding issue I'll leave to the Secretary of Education and the Budget Secretary. That is the deep end of the pool for sure. When it comes to the school bus cameras, that was an initiative that was enacted by this General Assembly and signed by the governor and set in motion a new program that also generates some grant funds that may be available to help in the world of student transportation, whether it can meet the needs that you're describing of you know, sidewalks and safer movements for walkers in Delco, I'm not sure. But you know, we do our best at PennDOT when we deliver a project to meet the needs of pedestrians and bicyclists as well. But it is hard. I mean, we have limited funds, and the cost of our projects far exceeds our ability to deliver all the ones that need to be delivered. So when it comes to transportation funding, that is an ongoing conversation that I'm happy to have. When it comes to student safety, of course, PennDOT will do everything that we can in coordination with intermediate units and school districts to advance student safety. And whether it's school bus cameras or red light cameras or speed cameras, you know, this General Assembly will provide the statutory framework for us to be able to deliver those things.
I appreciate that, Secretary. And lastly, Act 38 does cover a wide range of those suggested solutions. But when we have these studies, how do you, in turn, intend to continue to work with school districts, with municipalities? Is there any kind of program or education that goes out to these particular entities that would help parents? Because those are the questions we get most of the time. In the municipalities, in those meetings, and the school board meetings, it's coming from parents about how we're keeping their children safer.
Yeah, the challenges are financial for PennDOT. I mean, every single project that would be envisioned by families in every school district in our state, probably not in the realm of the possible for PennDOT to deliver, despite their worthy nature. We will, working with our planning partners, in your case, DVRPC again, try and advance projects that are in the common interest. And I would hope that DVRPC, and I'm sure they do, calibrates the needs for students that walk to school to make sure that they have the safest possible route. I know that exists in the city of Scranton and other urban centers across the state. It is a challenge, and in a lot of, you noted in your district, there's 5 state roads. My suspicion is there are probably some walkers on local roads somewhere along the way as well. So we have a shared challenge when it comes to state roads or county or local roads.
Thank you, Secretary, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to District 6. Thank you.
I think we have them all except nobody from District 1. So I'm going to shout out Brian McNulty and his team in Erie. They do a great job in northwestern Pennsylvania, in Crawford and Warren and Venango and Forest. You know, the work that they did with the Thanksgiving blizzard, 4 feet of snow on I-90 was noteworthy. And I value the shout outs to all the DEs and all the districts across the state. It's proof, it confirms what I said earlier, that legislators, by and large, in almost every case, have really good relationships with their district folks, and you should.
Thank the gentlelady. Chairman Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming today, and I want to thank you in advance for your team for all the hard work and the partnership we've had since I become Majority Chair of Transportation. A lot of stuff came up today from my colleagues across the Commonwealth, and what we learned is when we travel the Commonwealth, and you being by our side, and when we talked about transit, transit's a nonpartisan issue. It's about moving people, whether you're from Westmoreland, Fayette, Erie, Philadelphia, or Lackawanna, it didn't matter. The message from the people we all heard, and I think that's important for us to bring up to light, is we need to help. They need help. Every agency across the Commonwealth, all 67 counties needed that assistance. I don't want to mention each individual county, but I remember going to one county and said, you know, this additional funding will allow us to take 40 more people to the doctor today for their health care, because their children moved out of that county to one of the bigger cities here in Pennsylvania for work. So the children live 2 hours away. They can't get to their parents. They can't shuffle them to the doctors. And we heard a lot about funding SEPTA and Southeastern PA. This is not about SEPTA. This is about fairness. The formula was divided before we got here, and it was fair. If you divided that formula by population, every county but Philadelphia would lose, because SEPTA moves 1 million people a day. And just to put it in perspective for the people listening today, Center City, Philadelphia has 320,000 jobs. Every day, 320,000 people go to work in Center City, Philadelphia. They go to work there. There's almost 50,000 parking spots, almost just under 50,000. So you're talking about, if transit shuts down in Philadelphia, there's 300,000 people that aren't going to work tomorrow. At least 200,000. That's our tax base. Rep. Siegel brought it up about the tax base. Well, yeah, Southeastern PA, and if you take Allegheny from the west, 43% of the entire state budget comes to those counties. Get less than 18% back. So I don't want to hear about the fairness. It's not fair. We're paying the police pave and plow roads across the Commonwealth. So to me, that argument goes unfounded. Okay, this is a necessity for all Pennsylvanians, and I wanted to make sure I brought that out. We talked about the motor license fund, Mr. Secretary. You talked about the buy down, 125 million, 125 million. And I want to make sure that we're correct in that. Last year, we talked about doing a 2-year buy down, 125 this year, and next year to eliminate it. And now this year, we came back with a 50 million instead of the 125. At the end of this buy down, Mr. Secretary, is there anything legislative or in statute that prevents a governor of another time? I mean, I applaud Governor Wolf and Governor Shapiro for buying down these funds and investing in our roads and bridges. Is there anything from a future governor to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that 500 million back. There's nothing in statute that will not allow that to happen in the future. At any day, if he decides the governor changes his mind tomorrow, he can take that right up to $500 million. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, it would require passage of a bill in the General Assembly. I would remind you that at our high water mark, PennDOT was shuffling $800 million a year to the state police, 13 cents a gallon. That was a decision made by the General Assembly and the governor at the time. This governor, to his credit, with the support of the General Assembly, has decoupled $250 million. We inherited a $500 million obligation. That's down to $250. A $50 million decoupling this year is about 1 cent a gallon, on top of the about 4 cents. Oh, yeah, about 5 cents a gallon that's been decoupled already. So, but future General Assemblies, future governors will appropriate as they see fit.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying is not about that. So he says we're at 200 million at the end of this budget is where we're speculated to be, but there's nothing saying next year he has to decouple that money. Am I correct in stating that? Because I'm saying there has to be a legislative action taken by this General Assembly to make this decoupling a permanent thing. He's done it because the Governor Shapiro sees in the future a little bit and sees how much infrastructure money we need. But there's nothing stopping him from uncoupling that and saying, hey,
as you know,
I believe the act tells us 500 million, Mike, right?
As you know, Pennsylvania does one-year budgets. So the budget that will be approved, hopefully by June 30th, will speak to the finances of the Commonwealth for the upcoming fiscal year. And what happens in future fiscal years with respect to additional money decoupled or additional money from the motor license fund to support the Pennsylvania State Police would be a decision made by this chamber, the other chamber, and the governor.
Last question.
I'm hopeful that we don't do that.
Last question I have is about Chairman Struzzi and I, again, last year we passed legislation out of the House about contracting. And we talked about how if we, how we do our contracting and do our bidding and the money amount that can save on that. The question is are you still on the design build contracting legislation that we had? Can you tell us a little bit about how that would save the department in not only time but money overall? So it's the design build package. Is that
the design build best value legislation is legislation that has been enacted in various states across the nation. The vision for that would be for a design build project that would be a complex project. For example, the I-83 bridge over the Susquehanna River, $1.2 billion. Those sorts of projects, I think, are worthy candidates for design build best value. It's a way to deliver a project in a speedier and more financially sensitive way. That conversation, I'm sure, will continue in the next 6 months here in this building. It's a worthy conversation.
Well, thank you for all your work. And like my previous speaker, I have to thank Meredith because we beat up on her constantly. And if I don't, but for the record, something about chicken cutlets, and I won't get into it, but she knows what it is, and she's shaking her head. But thank you for you and your team for doing a good job, and I appreciate all the partnership we're working to move this Commonwealth forward.
And thank you, Chair Nielsen, for your good work. As I mentioned to Chair Benninghoff, the work that you do as the chair of the committee is important. We have shared responsibility. Meet 13 million people's transportation needs every day. And I value the work that you do and know the complexities and value your leadership. So thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. These morning hearings seem to get longer and longer.
It's no longer good morning.
Yes, good afternoon. First, I want to say, having worked in 2 PennDOT districts, 10 and 11, I have the utmost respect for what PennDOT does, the men and women who are out there fixing our roads, plowing our roads in the wintertime. And I also have the utmost respect for people who work in the transit industry, making sure we're getting to work, to appointments every day. And I think it's important that we clarify that I don't believe anyone in this chamber today has said we should not fund transit. It's a question of accountability on how we're using these taxpayer dollars. And again, these are taxpayer dollars we're talking about here. We can't simply throw millions here, millions there, without some level of accountability. And I think it's also important to clarify that we have, in fact, increased funding for transit over the past 10 years. No, we haven't increased the percentage of sales and use tax dollars that go to transit, but in fact, over the past 10 years, we have increased funding for transit by millions of dollars. In fact, in 2013, $800 million went to the two funds that fund public transportation. In the governor's budget book from 23-24, $1.35 billion went to fund transit. So to say that we haven't increased funding is not true. We have increased funding, but we haven't increased the percentage of sales and use tax dollars from across this Commonwealth that go to transit. And now we're talking in the general fund for this current fiscal year, $80 million was allocated to transit. Then the flex funding was $153 million. And now we're proposing to send another $293 million of sales tax dollars to transit. Again, I think we can all appreciate the importance of transit in this Commonwealth, no matter where you live, where you come from. But there must be some level of accountability. And we can't continue to throw dollars at problems and think they're going to fix themselves. So I would recommend, and I think that you had a good conversation with my colleagues, that we do look at updating the formula at some point. I think that's fair to have as part of the discussion when we're talking about channeling so many millions and billions of dollars of taxpayer funds to these transit agencies. I'd also like to ask if it's possible for us to actually see where these dollars are going. As PennDOT, you oversee the administration of these funds. Can you tell us or show us the budgets for various transit agencies? And I'm not just talking SEPTA or PRT. I want to know how these funds are being used, how they're being utilized. Are they being used in the right way? What are the efficiencies that they're looking at within their agencies? How can we stretch taxpayer dollars further? I think those are the parts of the discussion that we have to be having when we're talking about basically 10% of all sales and use tax dollars going to transit. I think we need to understand, and I think it would help us as legislators, as we're talking about this level of funding, to understand, how can we support these types of things if we don't even understand how these funds are being used? So I would appreciate if you could provide that information. You don't need to do it now, but I think it's important that we can understand and look at how these budgets are structured, how these funds are being used, so that we can make informed decisions about what we're voting on. I think that's very important, Secretary.
I do find it encouraging that a conversation relative to reexamination of the formula to direct more money to Westmoreland or Indiana, by its very nature, suggests that maybe Westmoreland and Indiana need more money when it comes to transit. So, the foundation of this conversation is interesting to me. Maybe there is a more broad justification for additional money to transit outside of SEPTA's footprint. But what you're describing with respect to audits of transit agencies, they all are subjected to an audit. You are certainly free, and we will share with you whatever information you need in that regard.
Please do. Please do. And I'm not saying that our agencies in rural, suburban, urban areas don't need more funding, but I want to make sure that that funding is being used in the appropriate manner to best serve our communities in this Commonwealth. Another question I have for you, and you already addressed the budget for the winter. I knew that was going to be a tough one for everything that's being spent out there, salt, man hours, overtime, all that kind of stuff. So we appreciate all the work, as I said, that's being done. But you mentioned CDL and CDL drivers and workforce, and that's a concern for me. Are you able to fill all of the CDL positions that you have currently?
No, if you have a CDL and you're eager to drive a truck for PennDOT, very likely we'd be able to hire you with very few exceptions in certain counties. It's a sea change to what existed at PennDOT from when I first started my political career. Now we have banners at county maintenance offices hiring. And if you have a CDL and you have a driver record that supports the hiring, very likely you'd land a job with PennDOT as a CDL driver. We're aggressive as we can be with respect to engaging with potential workers, job fairs, and all the sorts of things that you would imagine. And we will continue in that regard to make sure that we fill our ranks. But it is a challenge.
Thank you. Can I have one more minute, if you would, Mr. Chairman? With that said, and I understand there's a shortage of CDL drivers, not just within PennDOT, but across this nation. Now, the governor has proposed legalizing recreational marijuana, and I don't believe you can have a CDL and pass a drug test. I mean, you have to pass a drug test to have a CDL. So if recreational marijuana is legalized, does that concern you based on already not being able to meet your CDL driver needs?
What would concern me is whether or not the driver's impaired. The same thing applies with medical marijuana. So it's a case of whether the driver is impaired at the time that they're driving.
But that could diminish.
You can't have an impaired driver, and that would be my concern.
That could diminish, though, the number of people who have CDLs.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not in a position right now, not having thought of that in advance or done any research. The universe of potential CDL drivers are out there. Somebody that is a user of medical marijuana can get a CDL today. The challenge that you're describing comes at the moment in time when they're engaged by the state police or the local police as to whether or not they were impaired. That is the challenge that exists for law enforcement and the courts with respect to whether or not somebody would be subjected to a driving under the influence charge.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and for your staff for being here today. I will join the chorus of members that appreciate the work that PennDOT does across this Commonwealth. There is no place in the 67 counties in this Commonwealth that PennDOT doesn't touch or isn't involved. And so I join my colleagues in thanking you all for your work every day.
Thank you, Chair. And I will, I get to sit here and answer the questions and be the face of PennDOT, but I can tell you the folks at the table with me, the folks behind me, and the folks at every one of our PennDOT buildings across the state deserve all the credit. They're the ones especially with the hard hats and the vests, and the folks that do work that's unnoted by the average person. They do real work to meet the needs. I get to sit here and answer these questions, but the real work is done by others.
I'd also like to thank you, but also double down on some of the comments made from some of our members around inclusion and diversity with regards to the workforce that we have here at the Commonwealth, as well the vendors that we are contracting with to do the work. I would love to have a longer conversation about what we're doing and what we could be doing better to increase the numbers of vendors who are getting contracts with PennDOT, as well as the PennDOT workforce. So I would love to do that.
Happy to have that.
The last thing I'll say, Mr. Secretary, I've heard a lot of folks talk about the transit authority that services the folks in my district. SEPTA has about 700,000 plus trips a day. In southeastern Pennsylvania, they move folks from all over the region into Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, and all around. The good gentleman from Lehigh talked about the numbers. Southeastern Pennsylvania does generate 41% of economic activity, while only 32% of the population and 5% of the actual land. Southeastern Pennsylvania generates 38% of the general fund. But at no time since I've been a member of this august body have you heard me say that we should pull back resources from the other parts of Pennsylvania that don't generate those type of numbers. See, I believe in this being a commonwealth. And what that means is that what is generated in southeastern Pennsylvania or in Allegheny County helps to build roads and bridges in Pike County that I will never go across. Pike County, a county that only has 50-some-odd thousand people. Wayne County, a county that only has 50-some-odd thousand people. Listen, we have counties in Pennsylvania with under 5,000 people. If they were on their own, they would not be able to generate the revenue necessary to fix the roads and bridges in those counties. But luckily, they don't have to, because we do have this thing called commonwealth. So it is easy. It is easy. It is very easy for my colleagues who do not represent southeastern Pennsylvania. You go home and you tell your constituents when they talk about SEPTA that they should be saying two words: thank you. Thank you to all of those people who get on SEPTA every day and travel to their jobs, and they actually see less money coming into their districts than those counties where they don't have SEPTA. They should say thank you. Thank you to those people and those tax dollars that go to fix roads and bridges that they will never travel on. They should say thank you because for years, we'll talk to the state police this afternoon, but people in my city, when they call the police, it's not the state police that shows up. Yet and still, we in my area fund the state police, which covers many of those places that we're talking about that are not affected by the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority. So look, I get it. It is easy to take shots at SEPTA. I understand. There is accountability that is necessary. I want to know about the safety of SEPTA. I want to make sure that we're using all of our dollars adequately on SEPTA. I want to know what we're doing about the subway system and the homeless problem that we have on the subway system. Hell, last time I went on the subway, it stunk. I want it to smell better. I want all of those things. But what I will not do is allow people to demagogue an agency that takes workers back and forth every single day. And the revenue that is generated by those workers goes out to all of Pennsylvania's counties. So the next time somebody asks you about why we fund SEPTA, I want you to look in your rural area to the closest road and bridge and point to that and say, that's why we fund SEPTA. Because if it wasn't for Southeastern Pennsylvania, if it wasn't for Allegheny County, if it wasn't for places in Northeast Pennsylvania, those roads and bridges in our smallest counties would not exist. Those water treatment plants that are funded would not exist. That's why we have a commonwealth, for the common good. Let us all remember that when we're asked those questions. So thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Thank you for the work that you do every single day for the people of this Commonwealth.
Thank you, Chair, for your leadership and good work.
That will end this budget hearing for this morning. We'll be back, let's say 2 o'clock with the state police. We will reconvene at 2 o'clock this afternoon with the Pennsylvania State Police. This committee hearing is adjourned.